The committee will come to order. Good morning, and welcome to today's hearing on Hong Kong's Summer of Discontent and U.S. policy responses. This is the second China Commission hearing this year on the situation in Hong Kong. During our May hearing, the Commission heard compelling testimony from Hong Kong pro-democracy advocates, including Martin Lee and Nathan Law, who expressed serious concerns about the extradition bill that was quickly moving towards becoming law at that time. That legislation would have put anyone in Hong Kong, including U.S. citizens, at risk of extradition to mainland China, where lack of due process and custodial abuse have been well documented. Over the last 16 weeks, millions of people from all walks of life in Hong Kong have taken to the streets in an unprecedented and sustained show of unity. The protesters have inspired the world and have risked their lives, their health, their jobs, and their education to fight for the future of Hong Kong. Thank you for your courage and thank you for your bravery. We stand in solidarity with you.
我们感谢他们的勇
As
气。
protests continue throughout the summer,
我们和
Hong
他
Kong
们站在一
police
起。
used excessive and unnecessary force to target those engaged in peaceful demonstrations. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has called for an investigation. The UK
联
has
合国
suspended export
已
licenses
经
for the
开
sale
始
of tear
呼吁
gas
对香港
and
的
crowd
警方
control equipment.
可能
In
的
the
警
House
方
of
暴力开始
Representatives,
进行
Congressman
调
Chris
查。
Smith and I have introduced H.R. 4270, the Protect Hong Kong Act, that would prohibit U.S. exports of police
我和
equipment
另
to
一
Hong
位
Kong.
议员一起
U.S. companies should not be selling equipment used to
发起了
violently
保
crack
护
down
香
on
港法案。
pro-democracy protesters. I hope Congress will pass this legislation as soon as possible.
我希望
Although
国会
consideration
能
of
够
the
尽快
extradition
通过
bill
这
has
条
been
法案。
suspended, the people of Hong Kong are calling for greater accountability and democratic
这
participation.
个抗争已经
It's
从
my understanding
单纯的
that the
反
Hong Kong
反
protesters
修
have
例
outlined
变成
5
了
demands
香港
of
人
Hong
对于
Kong and
更大
Chinese
的民主
authorities.
香港
I
人
look
更大的
forward
民
to
主
hearing
诉
from
求。
today's witnesses what those demands are specifically, what progress has been made by the Chinese and Hong Kong governments on achieving them,
今
what
天我希
remains
望
to be
听
done,
到
and how
抗
we
争
in
开始
Congress
以
and the
来
international community
事
might
情
be
都有哪
helpful.
些进展，中
The
共
one
和香港
country,
政
two
府
systems
都
framework
有
was
哪些做
enshrined
法
in。the 1984 Sino-British Declaration and Hong Kong's basic law. This is an international treaty signed by the Chinese government
中英联
to allow
合
Hong
声
Kong
明
a high
是
degree of
一
autonomy
项国际
with the
条约
ultimate， aim of electing its chief executive and legislative council members by universal suffrage.
它
The
最终
2014
的
umbrella
目
movement
标
protests were sparked by the Chinese government reneging on its commitments to make Hong Kong
2014 年
more
的雨伞运
democratic.
动是由中
It
共
is
当
the
局对
continuing
于
erosion
香
of
港民
Hong
主
Kong's
诉求的忽
autonomy
视引起
and
的。
rule of law that fuel the protests in Hong Kong today. Over the last 5 years, the Chinese government has prioritized control over Hong Kong by stifling free expression and
过去
restricting
几
the
年
space
中
for，
中共
democratic
当局一
participation.
直在打
We
压
have
香港
seen
的
the
言
prosecution
论
and
自由。
sentencing of pro-democracy leaders, the
我们看到
disqualification
他
and
们
removal of pro-democracy legislators, and the introduction of a new
取
national
消
anthem bill that would
民主
restrict
派议员
free
的议
expression.
员资格。
Anson Chan, the former Hong Kong chief secretary and legislative council member, recently offered this insight, and I quote, "If only Beijing would understand what makes Hong Kong tick, what are the values we hold dear, then they can use that energy to benefit both China and Hong Kong. Instead, they have
最近我
this
听到一
mentality
位
of
香港
control,"
议员
end
说，
quote.
如果北京真的能
While the
够
protests were
理解
sparked by
香港的话
concerns，about the extradition bill, the heart of the discontent is that Hong Kong's political leaders do not represent and are not accountable
香
to the
港人
people.
愤怒的来
Instead,
源
Hong
就
Kong's
是
leaders are beholden
香
to
港
the
的
Chinese government.
领导人
Millions of
不
people
懂得
would
香
not
港
have
人
to
的愤怒
protest
到
in
底
the
是为
streets
什么。
if they could freely choose their political leaders. I
如果
hope
香港
the
人能
Chinese
够
government would understand
举他们的
stability and
领
prosperity
导
can be
人，
achieved if Hong Kong's autonomy is respected and if the chief executive and legislative council members were elected without Chinese influence over candidate selection. In light of the continuing erosion of Hong Kong's autonomy and the
我
recent
希望在
violence
以后
against
香
peaceful
港特首的
protesters,
选举
I
能够
believe it is time
不
for the
受
United
到
States
中
to
共的影响
reconsider。its policies toward Hong Kong. U.S.-Hong Kong relations are governed by the U.S.-Hong Kong Policy Act of 1992. That commits the United
美
States
港
to
关系
treating Hong
是
Kong as a
在
separate
1992
customs
年
territory from the rest of China,
美
so
港
long
关
as
系
Hong Kong remains
法案
sufficiently
下建
autonomous.
立的。
I'm proud to support H.R. 3289,
我支持香港民主与人权法案这条法案。这条法案要求美国对香港的自治程度进行每年进行测定，以保证美国继续给予香港，以判断美国是否要继续给予香港贸易上的优惠待遇。
Over the years, Hong Kong has prospered and become the financial center of Asia because of its strong commitment to the rule of law, good governance, human rights,
多年来，香港由于对于法治的坚持，使得这个城市成为了亚洲的金融中心，经济上十分繁荣。
So to be clear, we stand together with the people of Hong Kong and indeed all the people of China when we express our concerns about the human rights violations.
我们在关注香港人权迫害的同时，我们和香港人站在一起，也和中国人民站在一起。我们希望保护香港的自治和法治。
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for convening this important hearing, for your willingness to host it here in the Senate side.
Kind of nice over here.
It's quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah. A little different pace. We had 4 votes yesterday. Today people will be exhausted.
Yeah.
But anyway, I want to thank you for doing this. I look forward to our continued partnership on this commission, and particularly as it relates to this topic. I also want to thank all of our witnesses, especially those who
我
are
也想感谢今天我
on
们
the
所有
front
将要
lines
发言的
and
人
have， even
尤其是
been
那些
jailed
站在前线
multiple times,
抗争的
and
人。
we'll hear from them today about the things that have been
我
done
们今
against
天也
them.
将
And your
会听到
commitment
来
to
自他
freedom
们
and
的声
democracy
音，以及
it
你
is
们对
inspiring.
于
It really is
民主和
inspiring for
人
those
权
of us who
的
live in this
捍
republic. It
卫，
reminds us
这些都激励着我
of
们，
why so many of us serve here and what we
也
seek to
提醒
preserve
着我
around the
们
world, and
我
that's
们
why
的
we
工
want
作
to
是
stand
什
with you.
么。
Your fight and the fight of your fellow
你们
Hong
的抗
Kongers is
争
the
和你
fight of
们
every
同伴的
human
抗争，
who yearns for liberty and dignity and
对
demands that
于
their fundamental
人
rights be
尊严
respected
和
and be
自
upheld.
由的
Let me
抗
say at the
争，
outset to the people of Hong Kong,
激
we
励着我
stand
们。
with you, and by we I
我
mean
想说，
this
香港
is
人
a
民，
bicameral,
我和你们，我
bipartisan
们和你站在，
commitment, as
你
you
们
will
站在
see
一
today
起
and。have seen in the past few days on these efforts across both political parties and every major figure. And not only that, but many Americans stand with
这
you
种
in your
支
fight to
持
keep
来自于
your
两
long-cherished
党，来
freedoms.
自于许多的
It
美
was
国
only a
人
few
民。
months ago in May that we held a hearing on Hong
几个
Kong.
月
It
之
was titled
前
Hong Kong's Future
，5
in the
月
Balance,
我
Eroding
们也
Autonomy
举
and
办
Challenges
了一
to
场
Human
关于
Rights.
香港的
At
听
that
证
hearing and
会。
even before, it was highlighted on the facts that the Chinese
这场听
Communist
证
Party has been
以
eroding
及
Hong
以
Kong's
前的
autonomy
听证
and
中，
freedoms guaranteed
中
by
共
the
我们都提到了中
Joint
共当局对于
Declaration
香
by
港
the
自
basic
治
law.
的
The May hearing
危
discussed the
害，以及他
extradition
们
bill that if
对
it would
于
have
中英
passed
联
would
合
have
声明
exposed everyone
的
in Hong Kong,
忽
and that
视。
includes, by the way, 80,000 Americans who reside there, would have exposed them
美国有
to
8万的
the
公民在
justice
香港居
system,
住
or，the so-called justice system of the
他们
Chinese
将
Communist
会
Party. The same justice system that routinely tortures those in its custody, that denies critically needed medical care, that arrests lawyers for serving their clients,
中共
and that
的
places the
法治系
desires
统
of the Communist Party above every and any demand for justice. The proposed bill exposed the very real and increasing threat to Hong Kong's autonomy, but
逃
few
犯
of us
条
could have
例是对
anticipated the
香港
events
自
that would
治
follow.
权的
Since
进
June,
步。
the people of Hong Kong
危害。
have bravely taken to the streets for 15 straight
从
weeks
6月开
in more than
始，
400 separate
连
demonstrations
续
involving more
16
than
个星
8 million
期，香
people
港的抗争者走
of
上
every
街
age
头，
and every background. Recently, there
来
have been
自
very
各种各样
credible
的社会
reports
阶
that have
层
emerged
和
of the
他
police's
们的年
brutal
龄
treatment of
各异。
demonstrators while in their custody. This weekend, for example, we saw
这
images
周末
of the police
我们
holding
看
down
到
a protester whose head was bleeding and
警察
spraying into the wound on the head pepper spray, which is an act of total
我们
cruelty.
看到
We
警察
watched the
向
police throw
一
tear
位
gas
已经受
grenades
伤的
at
抗争
journalists,
者
many of whom are well far
的
away
伤
from
口
the
上
demonstrators. Since the 21st of July, pro-Beijing
胡
thugs,
椒喷雾。
thugs associated with organized crime and the party's United Front activities have violently confronted demonstrators and journalists and innocent passerbys, and the police just looked on, looked the other way.
当
And in some
一些
cases,
人
even
攻击记
cooperated.
者、抗争者
And
的
while
时
detained
候，
demonstrators have
警
been
察却在
beaten
旁
or their
边
faces smashed into the concrete,
熟视无睹。
journalists have photographed these same thugs in detention, quote unquote, smoking and playing on their cell phones after attacking journalists and
这
demonstrators.
些
Although Hong
暴
Kong's
徒
chief
袭
executive may
击
have
了
promised to
记
withdraw
者
the
和
extradition
抗
bill
争者以
when
后，
the
他们却
Legislative
在一
Council
边抽烟
reconvenes in October, the
玩手
government's
机。
violent response to the demonstrations demands accountability.
这些画
And
面
yet,
都被记者
Lam
拍
and the
下。
Hong Kong government refuses to press for any accountability for the
可
violence
是
by Hong Kong
香港
security forces that was committed
香港
and
政府
continues to be
到
committed
现在为
against
止不
peaceful
愿意去
protesters.
调查
The chief
有关的
executive
警
did not
方
listen
警方
to
的
the
有关暴
outcry
力
against
行
the
为
bill in Hong Kong since its
也
introduction,
不愿意让他
rather
们
tried
去
to
负
ram
责
it through the
任。
legislature. So what's at stake? The Hong Kong government's stubbornness in the face of public outcry has
香
launched
港
one of
政
the
府的
greatest
固
people
执
power movements we have witnessed in recent memory. The actions of the government and the
加
people
剧了
demonstrate that there are two
这
Hong
场运
Kongs.
动。
The Hong Kong of the government, totally leveraged by the Chinese government, has proven that it is not committed to a free and autonomous future for Hong Kong,
我
nor
们可以
is it
看
one
出
of rule of
香
law
港政
or of
府
justice.
并没有
The other
致
Hong
力于
Kong,
香
the
港
real
的
one,
保护香港的
is
法
the one of its
治
people,
和自
the
治。
students and youth activists, artists, journalists, doctors and nurses, lawyers, accountants, business people, from every walk of life, the city's people of all ages who have shown us a Hong Kong with a vibrant civic life, prepared to stand up for its own autonomy, democracy,
来
and
自香
liberty.
港各界的
It
人
is
都
clear
已经
that
做
these
好
two
了为
very
他们
different Hong
的
Kongs are colliding,
民主和自
and
治
therefore
抗
the
争的
city
准
is
备，
at a
包括医
crossroads.
生、律师、
The
学
fact of the
生
matter
以
is
及
maintaining
来自
Hong
社会
Kong's
各
autonomy
种
is
职业的
critical to
人。
U.S. interests, and it also has real implications for the United States and for the rest of the world.
香港
Hong
对于
Kong's
美
status as
国
an
的
international trade and investment
对于美国
hub
的利益来
are
说
just
十
as
分的
threatened
重要
as。long as the long-cherished freedoms of the Hong Kong people are, as long as the long-cherished freedoms of the Hong Kong people are being threatened. Threatened, by the way, not by us, but by the Communist Party of China.
香港
So it
的
is my belief that it's
自由
long overdue for the United States and the free world to respond.
正
I
在
hope
受
we
到
quickly
威胁，
pass
并
the
不是
Hong
受到
Kong
来自
Human
我
Rights
的
and
威胁，而是
Democracy
受到来
Act,
自
which
中
I
共的
hope
威
will be
胁。
heard next week in committee, so that we can provide this and future administrations with updated tools to respond robustly and flexibly to the Chinese Communist Party
今
and
天
its
我们的听
proxies
证
who
将
are
会为以
undermining
后
Hong Kong's
的
autonomy. The
我
U.S.
们提
government
供
and
更
other
多的证据，
democracies
以
need
及
to hold
如何
Chinese
应
and Hong
对
Kong
中
officials
共的办
accountable
法
for。their failure to uphold their commitments. The United States and other nations have options precisely because Beijing benefits from Hong Kong's special status, a special status
北
which has
京
made
从
Hong
香
Kong
港
an
的
international
特殊地
financial
位
center,
中
built
在获利。
on the promises that Hong Kong made to the world, that China made to the world with regards to Hong Kong, which they now seek to break.
可是
China's
他们
leaders
现
must
在
either
却在
respect
试
Hong Kong's
图
autonomy or know that their
不
escalating
去
aggression
遵守他
will
们
lead
对
them
世界
to
做出的
face
承诺，
real
也就是
consequences,
保护
not
香
just
港
from the
的
United States, but
自
from the free
治
world.
和自
And I issue
由。
one final warning of this regard. I anticipate fully that they will continue their work to turn the system of government in Hong Kong to resemble more like the one that exists in Macau, one that allows them to intervene in the legal system as they
我相
wish.
信中共当局
So we're here
会
today to
继
examine what
续
has
想办
happened,
法
to
使
look
香
forward
港
to
的政
Hong
府
Kong's
变成
future.
像
There
澳
are
门的
many
政府那样。
challenges in our relationship with China, but Hong Kong must remain a priority. Hong Kong is not a Chinese internal affair, and the world
香
has
港问
a
题并不是中国
responsibility
的内政
to
问
help the
题。
people of Hong Kong move towards a future that protects their individual freedoms and provides for civic well-being.
全世界
And so I look
都
forward to
有
hearing
责
your
任去
views
保
in
护
today's
香港
discussion.
人
And I
对
thank
于
you
民
for
主
your
和自由
courage and for
的
your
追
commitment.
求。
Thank you very much. And let me just emphasize one thing Senator Rubio said. I mean, we represent
我再
up
想
here
强调
on
一
this
点。
commission a diverse political
我们在
spectrum
这里代
from the
表
left
了
and
非
to the
常
right and
多
everything
元
in
化
between.
的政治
And
背
we
景
have lots of differences
我
on
们
lots of
有左
issues.
派议员，也有右
We
派
probably
议
couldn't even
员。
agree on what to have for lunch. But we
我
do have
们
one thing
在
in
非
common,
常
and
多
that
的
is
问题上都有
we
分歧，
believe that
我
your
们甚至
cause is
连
noble and
午
just.
餐吃什么这个
And
问
we
题
are
上
honored
都有
that
很
you
大
are
的
all
分
here
歧。
today. So
可是我们在这个问题上
we want to welcome this distinguished
我们
panel.
是站在一起的。
I will
在香
introduce
港问
each
题
one
上
of
是
them, and
站
then
在
we'll
一起
go
的。
to testimony.
下面我们 马上开始听证。
Okay, all right, we'll yield to Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. And what a panel of heroes, the best and the bravest and the
坐在这里
brightest.
的有
Thank
非
you
常多
for
的
being
英
here
雄。
and bearing witness to a very ugly truth as to what Hong Kong is doing. It has been a
我们在这
long,
里将
hot
要
summer
探
in
讨
Hong Kong, as we all know.
香港政府的
The
一些
inspiring and
比
courageous
较丑恶的
protests
行为。
there are a daily reminder of the stark differences between free and
香
authoritarian
港
societies. The
发
people
生
of
的
Hong
事情
Kong
对
have
于我们
shown
来说
the
是
world
每天发生的
that
事
a
情
free
对于
people
我
will
们来
not
说都是
accept
一个
the
提
boot
醒，那么就是
of
民主
repression
和
without
专制
protest.
政府的区别。
The millions of Hong Kong protesters have also
香
done
港
the
几百
world
万的
a great
抗争者
service. They have exposed Beijing's
也
plan to erode freedoms
帮助
guaranteed
全
to
世
the people
界
of Hong Kong
看到了
by
北京
international treaty. They have
是什
exposed
么
Beijing's
是如何
pernicious
对
and
待
repressive
国际条
behavior.
约，
And
是
make no
如
doubt
何
about
的
it, the
压
Chinese
迫香港的
government
民众
is。both uniquely repressive and incredibly paranoid about maintaining its grip on power. Today, there are over 1 million
北
Uyghurs
京当
interned
局
in Orwellian
十
political
分看重他
education
们的
camps.
权利。
Human rights lawyers have disappeared and been horribly tortured in detention. Christians, Tibetans,
人
and
权
labor
中国的人
activists
权
and
律
journalists
师
as well face egregious
记者
abuse and the most
藏人
intrusive system of surveillance
新疆
operating
人
in the
都受
world
到了
today.
迫害和压迫。
Why would anyone want their political fate determined by Beijing? If given a choice, no one would.
在
As
这种情况
inspiring
下，
as the
怎么会有人
protests
希
have
望
been,
他们
they
的
have
命运
also
掌握
raised
在北
serious
京的手
concerns
里
about
呢？
the actions of the Hong Kong
没有
and
人希望
Chinese
他们的
Communist government.
命
The
运
violence
掌
and
握
the
在
use
像
of
北京这样
force
的政府手
perpetrated
中。
against the protesters by thugs and police, I repeat myself, is extremely alarming. Representative
香
McGovern
港
and I
的
were the
暴
first
徒，
members of
香
Congress
港
to call on
的
the
警
Trump
察
administration
对于
to suspend the
和一些
sale
暴
of
徒
tear
对于
gas,
抗争者的袭
rubber
击
bullets,
是非
pepper
常的
spray, and other crowd control
令人
equipment to the
警
Hong
醒
Kong
令
police. And I agree with him. We need to quickly pass the
我
Protect
们
Act
需要
that
尽
we
快的通过
introduced last
保
week.
护香港法案。
Also alarming are the repeated and irresponsible threats of
另一个令人
intervention
震惊
made by
的
Chinese
是
officials,
一
particularly
点
given
是
that
中
this
共
year
当
marks
局
the 30th
发
anniversary
出的
of the Tiananmen Square
动
massacre.
用军队
The Hong Kong and
干
Chinese
涉香港
governments
的
are
动用军
alone
队
responsible
对
for
香
the
港进行
grievance
镇压的这种威胁。
expressed by the protesters, and they alone can peacefully end the protests by
在
addressing the
警察不
demands
在场的
for
情况
universal
下，
suffrage and
香港的抗
investigation
争
of
者可以
police
非常
threats.
和平理性的
Blaming
发
the
出他们的
United
诉
States
求，然后
government
自行
and
结束
blaming
游
the U.S.
行。
Congress for the protests
可
is
是
a
中国
act of cowardly propaganda
却
and not befitting of a nation such as China, which has aspirations of global leadership. It is time for the U.S. policy to respond
却
to
责备美
Beijing's
国政府
long-term ambitions in the
在
Hong
香
Kong
港
and pass the
却
Hong
把
Kong
在香港发
Human
生的一
Rights
切
and
归罪于美
Democracy
国
Act.
政府，这是一
5
个非
years
常
ago,
懦弱的
Mr.
行为
Chairman,。I introduced the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act with my CECE co-chair, Senator Brown.
之前
The bill
我
allows for
我
a
将
more
香
robust
港
U.S.
民主和人
response to
权
the
法院
steady
引入
erosion
国
of
会，
Hong Kong's autonomy and human rights. Over the years, Senator Rubio and I have
以保护香
upgraded
港
the
的
bill, and
自
you
治
as
和
well,
民
to
主。
reflect the kidnapping of booksellers, the
可
disqualification of
是
elected
过去几
lawmakers,
年中，
the
香港的书
political
商被绑架，然后
prosecutions
被
of
消失。
Joshua Wong, Nathan Law, Benny Tai, and others. However, every time,
包括黄之
every
锋、
single
罗
time
冠
we
聪在
pushed
内
for
的
passage, there was
香港
opposition
的人
from
权人
the
士都多次
diplomats,
被关
the
押。
so-called experts, the committee chairs in both the House and the Senate, and the American Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong. We were told not to upset the status quo. We were told that upgrading U.S. policy would undermine their efforts with Beijing and its hand-selected political leaders in Hong Kong. We were told that our bill would cost U.S. businesses. It is the exact same advice
有
that
些
we have been
人
hearing on
有一些
China
专家
since Tiananmen
跟我
Square.
们说，如果我
And
们
the
通
big
过这
issue
个
was
法案，
then
将会伤
MFN.
害中美
China
关
experts have
系。
failed the American
可
people,
是
and their
这
advice
些专
helped
家
to gut
让美
parts
国
of
人
our own
失望
economy.
了。
Their advice this time will fail the people of Hong Kong as
这
well.
次他们
Specifically,
的
Mr. Chairman, as you know,
这次他们的
the
建
bill
议也会让香
directs the
港人失
Secretary of
望。
State to certify to Congress annually whether Hong Kong continues to deserve
这
special
项法
treatment
案
under U.S. law
将会
from
每
mainland
年
China
对香港
that
的
is
自治
different from mainland
自治
China
程度
in
进
such
行
matters
评
as
定，
trade,
以决定是否
customs,
继续给
sanctions
予香港
enforcement, law enforcement,
贸易优惠待
cooperation,
遇，
and protection of human rights and the rule of law. It directs the
保
State
护
Department
香港的
not,
法
I
治
say
和
not,
自由。
to deny entry visas based on an applicant's arrest or
同时
detention for participating in nonviolent
对于
protest
那些
activities
由于
in
参
Hong
加
Kong.
抗
It
争活
requires an annual
动
report from
被
the
关押、
Commerce
被判刑
Department
的
on whether the Hong Kong government
活动
adequately
人士，
enforces
美国
U.S.
不
export
会
controls and sanctions
拒绝
laws.
他们的，
It requires
不
the
会因为
Secretary of State to
这
submit
种关押
a
拒绝他们的
strategy
签证
to Congress
申请入
to
境。
protect U.S. citizens and businesses in Hong Kong from the erosion of autonomy
同时也
and the
会
rule of
保
law
护在
because
港
of
的美
actions
国
taken
公
by
民
the
和美国
Chinese
公司
Communist
免
government.
受中共政
Requires the
府
President to
的
identify
伤
and
害，
sanction persons in Hong Kong or in mainland China responsible for the
并
erosion of Hong
制
Kong's
裁
autonomy and serious abuses of
那
human
些
rights. We have
在
wide
香港或
agreement
在中
for
国那
this
些
legislation.
迫
It
害
is
人
time
权的
that it
人。
passed. I've heard it said that the business of Hong Kong is business. I believe it's clear that the business of Hong Kong is freedom. The people of Hong Kong are
曾
working
经
to
我
protect
听
the
说
rights and rule of law
大家都
that are
说
the
香港
foundation of the
的重
city's
点就是
prosperity
经济
and
和商
unique
业，可现在我
vitality.
想说，香
This
港的重点
commission
应该
and
是
so
自
many of our
由。
colleagues in both the House and the Senate stand united with the people of Hong Kong and will not be silent in the face of threats
希望
to their continued liberties,
我们
guaranteed
美国
liberties
人
and
和
way of life.
和国
The
会
U.S.
能
and
够
the
和香港
international
人站在一
community
起，不要在这样
cannot
的
be
压迫面
silent
前保
or
持
just
沉
make
默。
noise with nothing that backs it up. The whole world
当
has
然，
a
我们也不
stake in
要
the
只说
peaceful
话，没有
and
任
just
何行动，
resolution
我
of
们
Hong
要做
Kong's
出行
and
动
the。survival of the one country, two systems model. Hong Kong people,
香港
yayo.
人，加油！
Thank you. I am proud now to introduce our esteemed panel of expert witnesses this morning. Three of our witnesses traveled all the way from Hong Kong to provide their
我
testimony
们
to
有
this
3
Congress.
位
The
将要
panel
发言的人
includes
士
Joshua
从
Wong,
香港
a
来，包
pro-democracy
括
activist and the
黄
Secretary
之
General
锋，
of Demosisto. At the age of 15, he organized protests
他
against
是
patriotic
香港众
education
志
in
的
Hong
成
Kong.
员，在
Subsequently,
15岁
he
的时
rose to
候
prominence as a core leader of the 2014 Umbrella
便
Movement.
开始抗争，
Mr. Wong was
并
also
开
one
始
of
为
Hong
香
Kong's
港的自
first
由而抗
3
争。
political prisoners since 1997, sentenced in 2018 with Nathan Law and Alex Chow for leadership roles in the Umbrella Movement. Most
2018
recently, he was
年
arrested
因为
in August
因为
2019
领
for
导
his
和参
role
加雨伞
in a
运
peaceful
动而被判
protest outside
刑。
police headquarters during the anti-extradition bill movement. Denise Howe, a pro-democracy
何
and
韵诗
LGBTQ rights activist and an award-winning Hong Kong-based singer, producer, and actress. Ms. Ho is a prominent supporter of the anti-extradition bill protests in Hong
一
Kong
直是香
and a
港
leading
反修
figure in Hong
反
Kong's
反逃犯条例
pro-democracy
运动的
movement.
一个
She was
一位坚
arrested
定的
during the
支持者。
2014 Umbrella Movement for taking part in nonviolent protests.
他也
The
曾经
Chinese
在
government has banned
2014年雨
her
伞运
from
动中，因
performing
为
in
参与
China.
非暴力的抗争
And
而
in
被
July
关
2019,
押
Ms. Ho addressed the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva on
今
Hong
年他
Kong,
又
during
在
which she was
联合
repeatedly
国
interrupted by the Chinese
发
delegation.
表演
Sunny
讲，
Zhang,
介绍香港的
a
情况，可是
spokesperson
这
for
个
the Hong
发
Kong Higher
发言却
Education
多次被
International
中共
Affairs
代表
Delegation,
打
and an
断。
activist from the Student Union of the
张
University of
坤
Hong
阳
Kong.
他
Established in
是
July
香港大专学
2019,
界国际事务代
HKIAD
代表团
includes
的发
all
言人。
student unions of universities in Hong Kong with the primary mission of raising global awareness and support for Hong Kong's anti-extradition bill protesters and the pro-democracy movement. Mr. Zhang has participated in and organized exchange events and conferences in Hong Kong, Taiwan, South Korea, United States, and United Nations, and he recently gave a speech in the UK House of Commons in support of Hong
台
Kong.
湾、美国
Sharon
等多
Home,
地参与过
the
人权
Executive
活
Director
动
of，Human Rights in
并
China,
近期在英
where
国
she
发表演
leads
讲
its。international advocacy and strategic
谭
policy
进
engagement
长
with NGOs, governments, and
他
multi-stakeholder
是中国
initiatives.
人权执行主
HRIC
任
has。covered human rights and democracy
中国人
development in
权
Hong Kong extensively, including the 2014 Umbrella Movement. Ms. Home
一直在
has
持续地报
presented
道
in
香港的
numerous
人权
hearings on a
状
wide
况，包
range of
括
human
2010
rights
年的雨
issues
伞
before
运
key
动。
European, U.S., and international policymakers. She is a professor of law emerita at
她
the City
是
University of New York School of
纽约
Law
城市
and
大
has
学
taught
的
law
荣
for
誉法
18
学
years,
教
including
授。
training judges, lawyers, and law teachers at 8 law schools in China. Daniel Garrett, a PhD,
Daniel
an author,
Garrett
photographer, and political scientist
是
focusing
一
on
位
Chinese
政治
security,
理论政
politics,
治科
and
学理论科学
securitization of
家。
Hong Kong. Since 2011, he has documented over 600 demonstrations,
从
marches, and rallies in
2011
Hong
年
Kong,
他
including most
记
recently
录
the
了香港
anti-extradition bill
600多
demonstrations.
大大小小
Dr.
的抗
Garrett
争
is a
运动。
doctoral graduate of City University of Hong Kong with over 20 years of engagement with Hong Kong and completed his dissertation on one country, two systems under China's national
他
security
的
framework.
博士
Dr.
论文
Garrett
就是
was
关于
a
一国
career
两
national
制。
security professional, providing strategic counterintelligence, threat analysis, and served at the Defense Intelligence Agency, National Security Agency, and in the United States Air Force. So I want to thank you all for
也
being
曾
here.
经在
We
美
are
国的
honored by your presence, and we will begin
军
with you,
方工
Mr.
作
Wong.
过。
Good morning, Chairman McGovern,
早
Co-Chairman
上好。
Rubio, and members of this commission. It's an honor to be invited back to
很
Capitol
荣
Hill
幸
to
再
speak
次
about
来
developments
到
in
国
Hong Kong.
会
You may
听证
recall that I
讲述
last
关于
traveled
香
to
港的情
Washington
况。
more than 2 years ago and
2
testified before
年
this
前
commission
我也在这里
in this
听
same
证，
building on May
在
3rd
同
of
一个
2017.
同一栋楼
While I
里
said
面。
back then, Hong Kong's one country, two system
那时
was
我
becoming
说
one country,
香港的
one
一
and
国
a
两
half
制
system.
变
I
成
don't think
在
there's
逐
any
渐变
doubt
成
among
一国
observers
1.5 制
who。have followed recent events. Today, we are approaching dangerously close to one
现
country,
在
one
我
system.
们
The
是
present
在
state
逐
of
渐地向一
affairs
国一致
reflects
靠拢。
Beijing's inability to understand, let alone govern, a free society. The ongoing demonstration began
香港的
on
抗
June
争
9th when
从
1
6月
million
9号
Hong
开
Kongers
始
took to the
，100
street
万香
in
港人
protest
走
of
上街
proposed
头
legislation
反
that would
抗
have
逃犯
allowed
条
criminal
例。
suspects to be extradited
这个
from
条
Hong Kong
例允
to
许
China,
香港的任何
where there are
人
no
被
guarantees
送到
of the
中国
rule
大
of
陆
law.
接受审
Still,
判。
before the night have ended, Chief Executive Carrie Lam announced the bill's reading would assume and resume in 3 days. Hong Kongers were preparing for the
那
last
天抗
flight
争结束之
on
后，
June
香港
12th.
的特
And
首
then the
林郑月娥
unthinkable
说
happened. Knowing
将
that
继续推
Beijing
动这项
controlled
条
enough
例。
votes in the Legislative Council, protesters surrounded the complex earlier in the morning, successfully preventing lawmakers from convening.
7
I
月
was
1
then
号，
serving
香
my
港
third jail
的
sentence.
抗争者
For a
包围
moment,
了
I
立法
wonder
大
why the
楼。
news channel was replaying footage of the umbrella movement. Although it was
早天
not long before I realized Hong Kongers were back with even stronger determination. Lam suspended the bill on June
林郑月
15th,
娥
but fell
在
short
7月
of fully withdrawing it. A historical 2
暂缓
million
了这
damn
项条例，
people
可是并没有
demonstrate the
正式撤
following day,
回。
equivalent to 1 in 4 out of our entire
接
population.
下来，
I'm
香
not
港1/4的民
aware
众
of
走上
anything
街头抗
comparable
争。
to this level of discontent against a government in modern history. I was
我
released exactly 3 months ago, on June
我3个
17th,
月之前
and have
被
since
释
joined
放出
fellow
狱，
Hong Kongers to protest in the most
并
creative ways
开始一
possible.
起和香
In
港人抗
addition to the
争。
bill withdrawn, we demand Lam to retract
要求
label on us as rioters,
撤
drop
回
all
条
political
例
charges, and conduct an independent investigation into police
林郑
brutality.
月娥下台，
Some of us
调查
crowdfunded
警
for
方暴力。
newspaper advertisement ahead of the G20 summit in late June, calling for the
我
world
们也
not to
在
neglect Hong Kong.
G20
Others entered
峰
the
会的
chamber
之
of
前，在
Legislative
各
Council
大媒体
complex
上
on
发
July
广告，
1st.
希
The
望
same
世界
day,
关注
another
香港。
500,000 Hong Kongers protest peacefully. Crowd continued to show up in large number in
越
the
来越
past
多的抗
15
争者
weekends,
走上街
with more
头，
rallies taking place
越来越
almost
多
daily
的
across the
集会
territories. But the government would not
可
listen.
是政
Instead
府
of
还是不
diffusing
听
the。political crisis, it dramatically
香港的政治
empowered
危
the
机
riot police. The movement reached a turning point on
很大
21
一
of
部分
July.
程度是
That
由
night,
防暴警察
pro-Beijing
引起
thugs
的。
with suspect ties to organized crime
以及
gathered
那
in the
些
Yunnan train station
亲
and
共的
indiscriminately
暴徒
attacked not just
他
protesters
们
returning
与
home,
黑社会有联
reporters
系，
on the scene, but
他
even
们
passers
在
by.
现
The
场
police refused
攻
to
击
show up
抗
despite
争
repeated
者、记
emergency
者
call,
以及只
plugging
是
Hong Kong
通过的行
into a
人。
police state with mob violence.
香
On
港
August
在
5th
逐渐的
alone,
变成一
the
座
day
警
Hong
察
Kongers
城市，
participate
越来越多
in
的
a
暴
general
力。
strike. Riot police shoot 800 canister of tear gas to disperse
在
the peaceful
大
mass.
罢工的那
Compare
天
that，to
香
only
港
87 fire in the
防
entire
暴警
umbrella
察
movement
发
5 years ago.
放了大量
The
的催泪
police
弹，
excessive force today is clear.
警察
Their
的
excessive
过
use
度
of
暴
pepper spray,
过度行为
pepper balls,
非常的清
rubber
晰。
bullets, beanbag rounds,
他
and
们
water
发
cannons,
射布袋
almost
弹、
all of
水
which are
枪，
imported from Western democracy, are no less troubling. In light of this, I applaud Chairman McGavin and
我
Congressman
希望
Smith
主席
for introducing the Protect Hong Kong Act last week. Americans' company
推
must
动
not profit
保护
from the
香港法
violence
案。
crackdown of freedom-loving Hong Kongers.
香港
Co-chairman Rubio
对于
is
香
also
港自
right
由的
for
伤害
recently
不会
writing that Hong Kong's special
会使
status
得美国的
under
利益受
American law
损。
depends on the city being treated as a separate customs area. Beijing should not have it both ways, wrapping all the economic benefit of Hong Kong's
北
standing
京
in the
香港
world
现在享
while
有特殊
erosion
的
of our
贸易
freedom.
待遇，可是北
This
京
is the
不能
most important
一边
reason why
享
the
有
Hong
这
Kong
种
Human Rights
一
and
边利用
Democracy
着我们
Act
的特殊待遇，
enjoys the
一边
broad
又在打压
support
我们的
of
自由。
Hong Kong civil society. Lam finally withdrew the bill earlier this month.
林郑月
But
娥
just as
这个
protesters
月
have long stopped
终
calling
于
for her
正式
resignation,
撤回条
this
例。
decision was almost meaningless by now. The
可是
movement
现在
is far from
这
over
种正式撤
because
回的
it
意义
has
已
long
经
moved
不是很
beyond
大了，因
one
为
bill
民众
or
希
one
望他
person.
下台。
Our most important demand is genuine structural change in
我
Hong
们
Kong,
最
which
重
means
要
free
的诉
election.
求
Our
是
government's
要求
lack
普
of
选。
representation lies at the heart
我们
of
的
the
政
matter.
府
As I speak,
不能够
Hong
完全
Kong
代表
is
人民。
standing at a critical juncture. The stakes have never been higher. We are confronted
我们的
by the
我
huge
们从来
Chinese
没有面临
military
过这么大的
build-up
危
just
机。
across the border in Shenzhen. President Xi Jinping is unlikely to take hardline action before the upcoming National Day in October.
我认为
But
习近平在
no
10
one
月
can
1
be
日
sure
之前不
what's
可能
next.
采取太过
Sending
强
in the
硬的
tanks
政
remain
策，可是
irrational,
我不知道接下来
but
会
not
发生什
impossible.
么。
With Chinese interference in Taiwan, Tibet, and especially
中共
Xinjiang,
对于台
it
湾、
serves
新
as a
疆、
reminder
西
that
藏的打压，
Beijing is prepared to go far in pursuit of its grand
都提
imperial
醒着我
project.
们，
I was
北
once
京
the
的
face of Hong Kong's youth activism. In this leaderless movement, my
我曾
sacrifices
经
are minimals compared to those
我曾
among
经
us
是
who have
香
been
港
laid off
抗
of
争
protesting,
运动的领导人，可
who
是
have been
这一次
injured
的
but too afraid of
这一次
even
的抗
going
争是
to a
没有领导
hospital,
人的。
or who have been forced to take their
我
own
我
lives,
做出的
to have
贡
each
献
lost
非常的
an
小。
eyes. The youngest of the 1,500 arrested so far is only 12 years old
500
schoolboy.
名
I
被
don't know them
关押
personally.
的被
Yes, that
警
pain
察关
is
押
my
的
pain.
抗争者中
We
最小
belong
的
to
一
the
位才
same
12 岁
community,。struggling for our right of self-determination, so we can
我
build
只
one
是这个
greater
集体中的一
and
部
common
分，
future. A child born
一起
today
为我
will
们的
not
未来
even
抗
have
争。
celebrate his or her 28th birthday by 2047, when the 50 years unchanged policy is set to expire. That deadline is closer to us than it appears. There's no return for us. Decades
我们
from now, when historians look back, I'm sure that
并没有其他，我们
2019
没有
will
第
turn
二个
out
选
to
择。
have been a watershed. I hope historians will celebrate the United States Congress for having stood on the side of Hong Kongers,
我希
the
望
side
以后
of
的
human
历
rights
史学
and
家们
democracy.
能
God
够
bless Hong Kong. Thank you.
能够，我希望以后的历史学家们能够去赞扬美国国会在这样一个历史时刻，选择站在
Ms. Howe,
香港的一
welcome.
方，对香港的保护。
Thank you, Chairman McGovern, Co-Chairman Rubio, and the members of this commission for holding this hearing and for having
感
us
谢
here
你
at this
们
very critical
开
moment
展
for
这
Hong Kong.
个听会，尤其是在
For more
香
than
港这样
100
一
days
个
now, young
危急
people
的
in
时
Hong
刻
Kong，have been at the forefront of our resistance. This is a leaderless movement with
这是一个没
widespread
有领导
participation
人、
from
没有领
people
导
of
者的
all
运
walks
动。
of life. It
来
is a
自
fight
社
for
会各界
democracy,
的
a
人都
fight
在
for
参
human
加
rights, and
这
most
场
of all,
抗
a
争
fight。for universal
他们
values. What
在为
started in
普世
June
价
as a
值而
1 million
抗
people
争，在为
march
民
has
主而抗
morphed
争。
into a struggle for fundamental political reform in Hong Kong.
我们
Chief
希望香
Executive
港能
Carrie
够
Lam's misjudgments and arrogance
对警察
worsened the situation,
暴力进行彻底的
resulting in
调查，
a
对
total
警察
clampdown
进行
of
彻
the
底的改
Beijing
革。
government over Hong Kong's affairs. To date, more than 1,500 Hong Kongers, the youngest at the age of 12 years old, have been unreasonably
到现
arrested.
在为止，
Sadly, it
有
has
500
become a
名
daily
抗争
occurrence
者
to see
被拘捕，
youngsters being pinned
最
to
小
the
的才
ground
12
with
岁，
head concussions if not
小
being
孩
knocked
子被
unconscious.
压到地上。
On the other hand, riot police
甚
and
至会引
plainclothes
起脑震
officers
荡
have
这样
since
的
early on
危害。
deliberately hidden their ID numbers and warrant cards, making it
警察
impossible for us to even certify their legitimacy,
警
let
察
alone hold
并
them
不出
accountable.
示他们的
On August
警员证，然
21st,
后藏起
police
来他
from the
们警员证
Special
上的
Tactical
身份
Unit
证、
charged
警员
into
证号
Prince
码，
Edward
让
MTR
我们无
station,
法去
beating
追
up
究他们的责
passengers
任。
randomly. They then shut down the station for 24 hours,
他
refusing
们
medical care for those who were
这些
injured,
警察他们
raising
关
even
闭地铁
suspicions
站
of possible deaths
拒
in the
绝
station.
给那些受伤的抗争者
Separately
进
now,
行
they will be
拒绝让
charging
受伤
in
的抗争者
secondary
进
school
行
yards, shopping
治
malls,
疗
and。buses, where young people merely dressed in black can be searched or even arrested without
在
justification.
公共交通
In other
上，一
words,
些年轻人
merely
只是因为
being
穿了
young
黑色的
is a
衣服
crime
就要
in
被
the police
就要
state
被
of
搜
Hong Kong.
要被警察搜身。
The protests began with an extradition bill, but at the core, it has always been
这
about
场
these
运动
fundamental
最开始是
conflicts
由
between two very
反
different sets
逃
of
犯条
values.
例
On one hand, the
引
China
起的，可
model,
是它的
which
最
has
终
no
原因是
respect
两种不
over
同价
human
值观
rights
的
and the rule of law,
冲突。
and our hybrid
一
city
方
that has enjoyed these very freedoms for the
是
most of its
自
existence
由、
with a
法
deep
治，
attachment to these universal values that the United States and other Western societies
我
treasure.
们相信这一点也是
Hong
美
Kong
国和
represents
这种
something
普世
unique
的
in
价
the
值，也
world.
是美国和
We
其
have
他
long
西方国
held
家
dear our rule of law,
所珍视的价值。
transparent institutions, and the freedom of expression in a part of the world where these are most often threatened than upheld.
我们的言论自由
However,
也在
this
受到
system
威
is
胁。
now under great threat. companies like Hong Kong's major airline Cathay Pacific
香
has
港
succumbed
的
to political
国
pressure,
泰航
firing
空也
dozens
受到
of
了来
employees
自
due
中
to their
共当局
political
的政
stance.
治压
The
力。
business community is coerced into making political
香港
decisions.
的商业
As a singer
香港
and
的商
activist from
界
Hong
也
Kong,
被
I have
被迫
experienced
进
the
行，
suppression
就是在政治
firsthand.
上进行选
Ever
择。
since the umbrella movement in 2014, I have been blacklisted by the communist government. My songs and my name
我
are
过
censored
去
on Chinese internet.
上了
Pressured by the
中共
Chinese
的黑
government,
名
sponsors
单，
have pulled out.
我
Even
的
international brands
我的
have
作
kept
品，
their
我的歌
distances.
曲也
For the past 5
在
years
中国
and
大陆
even
被
more so
禁。
recently, China tried to smear and silence me with their propaganda machines spreading
中
false
共
claims.
现在
Right now, I
还
am
在散
facing
播关于
threats
我的
from
一些假新
pro-Beijing
闻，试
supporters
图
and could face
污蔑
arrest
我。
and prosecution at any time. Not only have I faced difficulties in both China and Hong Kong, but the self-censorship has now spread towards global institutions
这
and
种
cities.
自我审查
Recently,
来
the
自
National Gallery of Victoria in Melbourne,
已经
Australia, denied a venue to an event of Chinese
目
artist
前
Badiu Cao and myself due to
澳
security
洲的一家艺术
concerns.
机构也
Celebrities from Hong
禁
Kong,
止我入
Taiwan, and
入
China
内
are all pressured into voicing their unanimous support for the Beijing government and could be condemned for keeping their silence. Hong Kongers are now living in a constant fear and have
香港人
unfortunately
生活
lost
在
most
恐
of our
惧之
freedoms.
中。
For a city that has been famously known as politically indifferent, the younger generations have took up the
香
role
港
to safeguard our
人
home,
这
standing
个
up
城市，香
courageously
港
to
这
the
个城市曾
corrupted
经被认
system
为是
in
对
spite of
政治上漠
increased
不关心，
suppression.
可是现在这么多的年
To
轻
the rest of
人
the world,
站
the
出来
United States is often a
表
symbol
达
of
他们的
freedom
政
and
治诉求。
democracy. The
对于
freedom Americans
世
enjoy
界来
is
说，
something that the
美
people
国
of
是
Hong
自由
Kong
的一个
have
象
long
征。
hoped for. Even though our languages and cultures
尽
differ,
管我
what
们
we have
的
in common
语
is
言
the
文化不
pursuit
同，
for
可
justice,
是
freedom,
我
and
们
democracy.
的共同
Through
点
the
就是
challenges
对
of Hong
于
Kong, the
司法
West
公
is
正
also
和
waking up to
自
the
由的追求。
China's insinuating power in a global scale. Hong Kong is connected to the world in multiple ways, but China is
香港
trying
与
to
世界的联
isolate
系
it to exert
十分
control.
的密切，
If
可
Hong
是
Kong
中共
falls,
当局却
it
试
would
图
easily
将香
become
港
the
隔离起
springboard
来
for。the totalitarian regime of China to push its rules and priorities overseas, utilizing its economic
中共
powers to
试图
conform
用
others
经
to
济力
their
量
communist values,
来
just
迫
as they
使
have
世
done with
界
Hong Kong
各
in the
地的
past
人
22
去
years.
按
The
照他
U.S.
们的
and
价
its
值来
allies
行
have
事。
everything to fear if they wish to maintain a world that is free, open, and civil. I therefore urge the U.S. Congress to stand
我
by
希
Hong
望美
Kong
国
and most
国
of all
会
to
站
pass
在
the
香港
Hong
这
Kong
一
Human
边，
Rights and Democracy
通
Act.
过香港
This
民
is
主
not a
与人
plea
权法
for the
案。
so-called foreign interference.
这不
This
是
is a
外国
plea
势
for
力的干
democracy.
预，
This
这
is a
是
plea for
为
the
了
freedom
自由
to
和民
choose.
主，
And
这
lastly, I
是
would
为
like to quote
真理的抗争。
Eleanor Roosevelt, your most beloved First Lady. You gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. You are able to say to yourself, I lived through this horror. I can take the next thing that comes along. This is a global fight for the universal values that we all
这是
cherish.
为
And Hong Kong is in the
普
very
世价
front
值
lines
进
of
行
this
的
fight.
一场
We are
抗争，
once
我们都
fearful
珍视的
of
普
what
世价
might
值
have。come with our silence. And for that, we have now become fearless. Thank you.
因为这一点，我们才能够更加
Thank you.
有勇气。
Mr. Jung, welcome.
Chairman McGovern, Co-Chairman Rubio, and members of the committee, thank you for your invitation to this
感
hearing.
谢你们邀
Last year,
请我来
Chinese
这场听
President Xi
证。
Jinping said in a
去
cold storm
年
meeting that
中共
China
主席
would
习近
never
平
embrace the judicial independence in the West. This is why people in Hong Kong are trying hard to reject the extradition bill
说
because
中
we
国
do
中
not
国永
believe
远
in
也
a
不会去
country
采
who
取
looks
西方
down
的
on
这
human
种
rights,
民主制度。
disqualifying our
这也是为什
legislators
么
and
香港人
kidnapping our booksellers. We want to protect our legal system as the last barrier against
希望
Beijing's
保
political
护我们的
interference.
司法体
Apart
系
from asking for the
免受北京
withdrawal
的
of the
侵
bill,
蚀。
Hong Kong people also demand for an investigation into police
我们也
brutality
要
to
求
save Hong Kong from turning
调
into
查
a police
警
state.
方暴力。
More importantly, we demand
更
for the
重要的是
universal suffrage.
我
We
们希望
deeply believe that
香港能
without
够
any
实行
structural
普选。
political reform and a government chosen by the people, there
我们
is
希
no
望有一
possibility
个
for Hong
有
Kong to restore
由人
prosperity.
民选出来的
We
政府。
cannot have a society compromising the interests of individuals. The voice of these people should always be heard. Unfortunately, our government ignores our demands by saying
很不
that
幸
we
的
have
是，
no
我
stake
们的
in the
政府一
society.
直在忽视我
Our
们的
student
诉
union
求。
members are detained,
我们
followed,
学
beaten,
联
and threatened. During the
我们的
detainment,
大学生
one
们
of our student union members were told by the police
我
that
们
it was reasonable for them to rape some female protester when they frequently work overtime.
我们一
Besides,
位学联
the
的人听
authority
到警
tries
察
to
对
stop
他
us for
说，
having peaceful
他
class
们
strike
可
when
以
more than 50,000
性
students
就是
participating
警
in
方
it.
可以性
People who
侵
side with
女性
Beijing are
的
now
抗争者。
advocating to install surveillance cameras inside the classroom to monitor teachers and students who
他
dare
们
to support
警察
class
甚至
strike and
在
support the
香
movement.
香港大学，就是
This
香港各
apparently
大
violates
学
our
高校
academic
的
freedom
教
and
室内
freedom of
安装
speech.
摄像头
This
监
is
视
the right terror created by the
他们的
Beijing government,
教室。
which should be alerted by all people here. Nowadays, students and Hong Kong people are even ready to die for Hong Kong,
现
and
在
some already
香港
did.
的香港
They
人已
believe that
经愿意
the
为
only
香港
limit to
而
their
死，
freedom is their death.
有些已
This
经
is
付出了
the
这样的代
ultimate
价。
sacrifice for the motherland, and we must not
他们愿
forget
意
them.
为自己的祖国
Many students
牺
face
牲。
strong objection from their family. Some of them are even forced to
很
leave
多
home.
的抗
But
争
they
者
still
受到
choose
来
to
自
head
家
to the
庭
front line,
的
carrying a letter
反
with
对，
their
有
last
些人
will.
甚至不得不
They are
离开他们
determined.
的家。
They understand that the price of freedom
他们
is
理
high.
解
It always has
自由
been.
的价值是
But it
自
is a
由，
price
要为
they are
自由
willing
付
to
出的代
pay,
价是很
and
高的。
it is
可
a
是
path
他
of
们愿意付
liberation
出
they are
这样
willing
的
to
代
choose.
价。
We do
他
not
们愿意
fight
做出
for
这样的
freedom
选
out
择。
of passion. Passion will burn out. We
我
fight
们
for
并
freedom
不是
from a sense
我
of
们的行
duty
为
and
并不
dignity.
是来自于
China
热
is
情，热
rising.
情最终
China
会
is
消
using
却，
its nationalism and invasive economic dominance
而是我们的责
to
任，我们的行
colonize
动来，
small
我们的
countries
行动能
and
力来
put
自于我们的责
intense
任感。
pressure on people and companies like Cathay Pacific who do not conform to them. Teachers,
中共当
students,
局
civil servants, businessmen are
迫
all facing
害
political purge in Hong Kong. This new form of imperialism of China poses a severe threat to Hong Kong. This is a clash of values and system. We need to contain
这
the
是一
Communist
个
Party of
价值
China.
冲突，我
Offering
们
help
需
to
要
Hong
继
Kong
续
is the
对抗。
primary move to contain
中
China.
共。
One country, two system will expire in 2047.
一国两
U.S.
制在
government should help
2014
Hong
年
Kong
将
people
会
have
过
the right
期
to。decide our future. Therefore, we urge the
美
U.S.
国
Congress
应该
to pass
帮
the
助
Human
香
Rights
港
and
人民去
Democracy
选
Act
择他们
to
的未来，
expand
这也
its
就是我
current
们为
sanction
什么
list
要
to
呼
all
吁美
individuals
国
who infringe
国
our
会
human
通过
rights.
香港人权与民主
Moreover,
法案。
if a genuine universal suffrage cannot be achieved
如果我们
immediately,
不
our
能
autonomy
立
and
刻
rule of
获得
law
普
will
选，
continue to erode.
我们的
The
自治
situation
和
of
法
China
治将会进一步受
manipulating
到
Hong
破
Kong
坏。
as a backdoor for trading with Iran and North Korea
中
will
共
also
利用
continue.
香港作为
Then
一
the
个
U.S.
与
government should
伊
not
朗等
acknowledge
这样的
the
国家进
special
行贸易的
status
后
of Hong
门。
Kong. U.S. must send a strong signal that this
美国必须
special
向
status
北京
should
发
be
出
cancelled if
强
Hong
大
Kong
的
lost
讯
its
号。
autonomy in order to put pressure
如果
on China.
香港的
Otherwise,
自治受
China
到
will
破
keep
坏，
taking
那么这
advantage
样
of
的
Hong Kong's as
贸
an
易优惠待遇
international
应该被
society,
取
but
消。
hollow out our liberal values. With such an assertive policy, it demonstrates that America will no longer tolerate totalitarianism.
这样强
Hong
硬
Kong
的
people
政
will
策
take every
可以
step
表
with
示
the
出
last
美
inch of
国
our efforts
对
to
于
fight for
人权
democracy
迫害
and
的不
freedom.
容忍。
As Thomas Jefferson once said that he would be
汤
forever
马斯杰斐逊
against
曾
any
说
form of tyranny. And I believe this is the time for Americans
他
to
反
stand
对
with
任
Hong
何
Kong.
形式的暴
For 香
政。
港時代革命. Thank you.
Thank you.
我認為這是美國為香港站出來的非常好的一個時機。
Ms. Holm, welcome.
Thank you. Chairman McGovern, Co-Chair Rubio, and members of the Commission, thank you for this opportunity. It's an honor for me to stand in solidarity with the frontline activists. I want to thank the Commission members for their critical support
能够
for
和
the
香
Hong Kong
港
people
的
and
抗
your
爭者
leadership
站
on the
在
Hong
一起，
Kong
我
Human
感
Rights
覺
and
十分的
Democracy
榮
Act and
幸
the。Protect Hong Kong Act.
我希
Over the
望
past
國
3
會
months,
能
the
夠
whole
通
world
過
has
香
witnessed
港
the
人權民
historic
主法案
David
與
and
保護
Goliath
香港
standoff.
法案。
And against all odds, the Hong Kong people are standing up to the
香
powerful
港人
authoritarian regime in Beijing.
站在了
In this
北
historic
京这一
battle,
個強
they
大
are
政
not
權的
only
前
fighting for
面
the
面
democratic
前，
future of 7.4 million Hong Kong people, but they're holding the regional and global front front line on preserving
他
human
们
dignity and rights for all people.
为了
As
人类的
Congressman
尊严
McGovern
而
has
抗
already
争，
mentioned,
其实是
the
站在
past
了
summer
世
of
界的
discontent
前
is
线
in。fact part of years of ongoing resistance by the Hong Kong people against Beijing's encroachment on Hong Kong's autonomy, rights, and freedom. The mass demonstrations in the past have included
过去
resistance against security legislation, official brainwashing initiatives, and the
过
gutting
去
of the promised
几
genuine
年的
universal
过
suffrage.
去几年来，香港人一直在为他们的民主自由而抗争，包括他们反洗脑教育的运动。
A promise inscribed on the concrete sidewalks. We will return. They have kept that promise. Instead of Beijing's hope for movement fatigue, the protests supported
尽
by
管北京
unflagging
希望运
solidarity
动
and broad diverse
由于渐渐
participation
的
of
疲
Hong
劳
Kong
而
society
渐
are
渐自
moving
行
into
消
the
失。
15th week, pressing
可
for
是
now
香港的
5
抗争到现
non-negotiable
在
demands.
一直都没有停
The
止。
out-of-control, lawless actions of the Hong Kong police have provided mobilization fuel for Hong Kong people to add oil. As Chairman Mao said, wherever there is suppression, there will be resistance. And at the beginning of the Cultural Revolution, he also said, anyone who crushes the student movement will not have a good ending. I want to talk about the rule of law just briefly because there are tensions that were baked
我想
into the
讨
one
论
country,
一
two
下
systems
香港的
framework,
法治问
making one
题。
country, one system, or one and a half system perhaps an inevitable outcome. Taiwan's president, Tsai Ing-wen's takeaway from the current political crisis hits the nail on the head. Not only is one country, two systems not a viable model for Taiwan, but the
香港
Hong Kong example
台湾的
proves
总统蔡
that
英文曾经说
dictatorship and democracy cannot
一国
coexist.
两制
An independent functioning rule of law is essential, yet the Chinese state constitution and numerous high-level policy pronouncements legitimizes the subordination of law to the leadership of the party. The reintroduction of the Article 23 legislation that's in the works in Hong Kong will inevitably carry imprints of the party's concepts of national security. Second, the demand for complete loyalty to the party guts the independence of key pillars of rule of law, legal profession, and the media. But Hong Kong is not the mainland yet. Despite efforts
香
like
港
proposed Hong Kong
北京当
national
局要求
anthem
香
law
港
and
人
proposed
对
loyalty requirements,
共产党忠诚，
loyalty,
可是香
pride,
港
and
并
love
不是
cannot
中国
be
大陆。
legislated. So it's not surprising that Hong Kong people, foreign business, and the international community have been alarmed. The outrageous and painful excessive violence and abuse of law by the police have already been
警察
extensively described.
过
I
去
will
对
move
法治的这
to
种破
then
坏，已经
talking about what's at
得到了
stake in terms
很
of
清晰
the
的描
universal
述。
values. China's aggressive activism at the UN is undermining international standards,
中共
weakening the
在
existing human
联合
rights
国的这种
mechanisms,
行
and
为，确
restricting
实
the
是对
participation of independent
人
civil
权的一种
society.
激烈的
This
破
cuts Hong
坏。
Kong people as well as human rights defenders on the mainland and Tibetan and Uyghur communities from the key international platforms that's available to press for accountability. With this, instead of the West's hope for convergence, China is not only playing by the rules, it is vocally and persistently
尽管
asserting a set of relativist
西
criteria
方希望
that
中
it
共
alone
能够逐
can
渐的
apply and
改革，
pushing
可
for
是他们
Chinese models
并没有
of
这
human
样
rights,
做，而
democracy,
是
and development.
试
That is
图
no
将
human
中
rights,
国的
no
模式
development, and no democracy.
推向海外。
This rhetoric helps to intimidate, silence, and deflect from the accountability of the state. I want to point quickly to its role in blocking independent voices. China sits on the ECOSOC Committee of
我
the
想试图表达一
UN,
下中共对于独立声音的
who do
压
not face any
迫。
objections, such as the interruptions of Denis Howe's recent
例
intervention
如，
at the
他
Human
们
Rights Council.
在联合
The
国大
intervention
会
last week
上
by Patsy Ho,
多
the
次打
representative of the
断
Hong Kong
何韵诗的
Federation
发
of Women,
言。
is illustrative. She not only defended the SAR government's handling of the protests, but she accused the Hong Kong protesters of child exploitation and more. Patsy Ho, co-chairman and director of Macau casino operation, and is also a standing committee member of the Beijing Municipal Committee of the Chinese People's Consultative Conference. Because I am out of time, I want to really take the time to jump ahead to the problem of in addition to the disinformation campaign, including the egregious use by the China Daily on 9/11 of a photo depicting the destruction of the World Trade Towers to warn of terrorist attacks by Hong Kong protesters.
在
Beijing
9/11的
is
时候，
advancing a narrative of violence to frame the Hong Kong protests that is
以
echoed
9/11世贸大
uncritically by
楼
the
的
international
照
community.
片来
Within this framework, the
警
Hong
告
Kong
世
police
界，香
protected in
港
full tactical gear
香港抗争者的恐怖主义行为，可是这是利用假新闻在进行信息战。
clashes with civilian protesters. Hence, we hear both sides calls to de-escalate, but this deflects attention away from police accountability for its excessive use of force.
政府和抗争者双方都希望能够
Moreover, the narrow violence framing of the situation on the ground is erasing or marginalizing intentionally the proliferation of diverse, creative, and peaceful protests by the Hong Kong people, including by students in boycotts, elderly citizens, silver-hair volunteers protecting the children.
香港的银发族也上，香港的一些年纪比较大的人也上街抗争，支持学生逃犯条例。
And forming human chains, creating Lenin walls. And last Friday was Mid-Autumn Festival, and a small family-owned bakery in Saiwan made mooncakes with protest slogans.
通过
And in typical
做
humorous
带
Hong
有
Kong fashion, Hong Kongers are creating art.
抗争口号的月饼，形成人链等各种各样以及建立联农墙各种各样有创意的方式表达他们的诉求。香港人
Thank you again, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you very much. Dr. Garrett, thank you for coming, and we welcome your testimony.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman McGovern and Rubio, distinguished members of the Commission. It is an honor and a privilege to talk with you regarding the Chinese Communist Party's erosion of one country, two systems in Hong Kong under the pretext of national security and its nexus to the extradition bill crisis. I'll begin with 5 key observations background the current China-Hong Kong conflict and the one country, two systems crisis. First, today's one country, two systems is not the same as Deng Xiaoping's notion that proper peaceful coexistence between the communist and Hong Kong systems. Instead, it has been replaced by Xi Jinping's new era one country, two systems model, embracing political struggle and enemy-friend binary, and foregrounding Chinese national security as the paramount lens for governing the special administrative region and implementing one country, two systems. Rather than a confidence-building mechanism ensuring peaceful coexistence, one country, two systems under Xi Jinping is now intended to advance and safeguard China's sovereignty, security, and development
习近平统治下的一国两制已经变成了保证中共的权威和他们对香港的统治。
known as the 3 major dangers in national security with Chinese characteristics. The former situates communist China at imminent risk of being invaded, toppled, and separated, and its development, reform, and stability sabotaged, thereby leading to the derailing of China's rise, socialist modernization, and the one country, two systems policy. The latter dramatically broadens the notion of Chinese national security and radically expands the scope of Chinese authorities' prerogatives in administering one country, two systems. Consequently, it significantly erodes the special administrative region's high degree of autonomy, diminishes Hong Kongers' freedoms, and widens the threat to U.S. citizens and national interests in Hong Kong. Third, under Xi Jinping's new security paradigms and new era one country, two systems model, dissident Hong Kongers have been systematically enemified and securitized as mortal
在
threats
习
to
近
the
平
party
的
state
一国
and
两
banned
制
or
下，
removed from
香港的
positions
抗
of
争
political
者
power.
被推到了对
Elections
立
have been
面。
partially nullified, Hong Kongers disenfranchised, and terrorized with real and rhetorical political violence. The promise of Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong has been effectively replaced with
港
the
人自治
tyrannical role
的
of
这
patriots.
种保证
Official
已
declarations
经
and
受
party
到了
state
破
media
坏。
propagating Hong Konger enemy and Hong Kong threat security discourses have become ubiquitous, and cultural revolution like mass line and united front denunciation campaigns targeting
中共
Democrats, localists,
在
and westernized Hong Kongers have swept the city repeatedly
发
over
动
the
一
last
场
7
像文化
years
大
since
革
Xi
命一
Jinping
样
came to
的
power.
运动，来针对支持
Since at
香
least
港的人。
2012, Hong Kong and one country, two systems have been perceived by Beijing as communist China's weakest links in its resurgent totalitarian national security state. For Chinese authorities, both are at the
对
forefront
于
of
中共
ideological
当权来说，
confrontation with the
当
United
权者来
States and the
说，
West, a new Cold War in their terms. By the end of 2014 and the Umbrella Movement, the struggle to rule Hong Kong was said to have matched the intensity surrounding the 1997 handover and that China had to now rethink how to rule the enclave. An influential advisor to senior Chinese authorities said that Hong Kong faced a society-wide, quote-unquote, long-term struggle to eradicate the party-state's enemies in the city, a de facto cultural revolution that would involve, at a minimum, rectifying and synthesizing the judiciary, legislature, media, secondary schools, and universities. Chinese and special administrative regions' furtive efforts to impose the communist legal, political, and social norms on Hong Kong via the extradition law and
中共
unprecedented
试图通过逃犯条例将中国的这种模式输出到香港。
as Hong Kongers fight for their endangered freedoms, identity, and way of life. This is not an anomaly. It is the sixth Chinese governance crisis involving one country, two systems since 2003.
这已经是2003年以来第6次中共面对的香港人的反抗。
its so-called comprehensive jurisdiction in Hong Kong, and to roll back Hong Kongers' high degree of autonomy, liberal freedoms, and limited democracy by forcibly transforming Hong Kong into a Chinese communist city while maintaining a veneer of no changes.
他们试图将香港变成一个共产党统治下的城市。
Senior Chinese officials have described the extradition battle right now, as a quote-unquote battle of life and death, and as a battle to
中共
defend
的
Hong
高级
Kong.
官员将这种
A
将这
decisive
个
war
反
defending
抗
one country, two
反
systems,
修例运动
jeopardizing it.
形容为生
Since
死之战。
2000, since Xi Jinping came to power, national security is now a mandatory obligation for people in the Hong Kong SAR. This was never written in the original basic law. This has been done post facto since 2012.
从习近平当局以来，国家安全问题已经成为中共驻港办公室的一个重要的议程。
Han Zhong and Wang Yang, the head of the State Council's Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office, Zhang Xiaoming, and the chief of the Hong Kong SAR Liaison Office, Wang Zhemin. There are also indications that President Xi Jinping, as a member of the Central Coordination Group for Hong Kong and Macau Affairs, has weighed in. An influential United Front commentator and state media has also observed that if it were not for the full support of the central government, the legislation would have been aborted. Chief Executive Carrie Lam recently lamented in a leaked speech that since the issue had been elevated to one of national security and sovereignty, it had stripped her of any solutions or room for political maneuver. Another source explained that because the ELAB involved the mainland special administrative region relationship with the central government and the implementation of the basic law, it was not a matter entirely within the autonomy of the special administrative region government. This touches upon the Hong Kongers' 5 demands as well as U.S. policy towards Hong Kong. Beijing's imposition of communist, legal, political, and social national security norms on Hong Kong constitute a violation of Article 5 of the Basic Law, prohibiting the introduction of the socialist system
试
in
图
the
将
territory.
中共的司法模式输出到香港，是对基本法的一个违背。
and its civil servants effectively dissolves any difference between the communist and Hong Kong systems, thereby posing a significant threat to U.S. interests related to the protection of sensitive technologies and adherence to export controls. My last 2 comments before I submit the rest of my testimony. The Hong Kong police force has been militarized and nationalized by the Chinese Communist Party,
香港
effectively
的
becoming its little
警
gun
察
in the
在
special
中共统
administrative
治
region.
下
Since
已
the
经
beginning
军
of
队化了。
2019, mainland police have been tasked by President Xi with, quote-unquote, preventing and countering color revolutions, unquote. China's public security minister subsequently ordered police to firmly fight to protect China's political security, unquote, defend its national security and the leadership of the Communist Party. Earlier, Hong Kong police had received similar national security tasking from Vice Premier Han Zheng, who, in August 2018, charged them to, quote-unquote, firmly and effectively safeguard China's national security and rule of law by accurately and comprehensively implementing one country, two systems. Also, according to a vice chairman of the State Council's Chinese Association of Hong Kong and Macau Studies, the Hong Kong police were now, quote-unquote, on the forefront when it came to curbing Hong Kong independence, which meant their duty was not just to maintain public order, but to defend national security too. Chinese
香港警察的责任现在已经不仅仅是维护公共安全，而是去维护国家安全。
In no small way, the Hong Kong police have become the special administrative region's people's armed police.
香港警察已经变成了中共驻港办公室的警察。
To systematically manipulating and recasting Deng Xiaoping's error content and understandings of the basic law in one country, two systems, to accommodate Xi Jinping's totalitarian national security mandates, logics,
中共
and
在
outlook.
扭曲基本
The
法中
Chinese
的一些条
Association
例，
of Hong Kong and Macau Studies, or Hong Kong Macau Studies Association, a shadowy political warfare-like think tank connected to the State Council's Hong Kong and Macau's Affairs Office, is one of these new subversive vehicles. Concomitantly, a network of party-state constitutional and basic law experts and scholars, some attached to the National People's Congress Standing Committee, Hong Kong Basic Law Committee, have similarly contributed significantly to the erosion of one country, two systems policy, mobilized political violence, and informed the central authorities' understandings of the actual situation in the region. All these united frontiers are key players in the erosion of Hong Kong's freedoms and democracy and enablers of state tyranny. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll save my questions to the end. I'm going to yield now to the co-chair, Senator Rubio.
Thank you. And I'll just ask one question because I know members have places to go. I don't want them to get in on this. But the sort of the key issue before us is autonomy.
我觉得关键的问题是自治。2014年，他们中共拿走了普选权。2016年又取消了一些立法议员的资格。2019年，他们又试图推动这个逃犯条例。我想问，你们现在会如何形容香港的自治情况？
During the last congressional hearing, I strongly aware
过
how
去
one
上一
country, two
次
system
的国
eroded
会
to be
听
one
证
country,
中
one and a half
我就
system.
表达了
But
我
the
知道
recent political
一国两制
crisis
正在变成一
by
国
how
1.5
Hong
制。
Kong and Beijing government turned such a global city into the police state
香港
with more
和中共
violence
政
and
府
even
正
white
在试图
terror.
将这个
I
国
would
际城
describe
市
now
变
as the
成警察
collapse
城
of
市。
one country, two system.
我现在
And
想说，
also,
一国两
we are
制
we're
已
facing
经
the
彻底
death
的
under
失
the
败。
current constitutional framework. And I think now is also the time and the
我认
reason
为现在
which we hope to seek for bipartisan support. Support Hong Kong's democratization
也是我
should
们
not be the matter
寻求
of
两党
left
支持
or
的
right.
最佳
It
时
should be
机
a matter of right
支
or wrong.
持香港的自由
So,
抗争，这是一
on
个
a
对与
more
错的问题。
cultural and social context, there is a immense fear among the people.
现在
to
香港
speak
人
their
中
minds,
有
which
非常
is
多
a
的人
result of
不敢
how the
表达自己的
businesses
想
and
法，
the government institutions they have
他们
put
担
pressure
忧
onto
政府
their employees or the people to
对
keep their mouths shut, basically. And so,
政府对一
this
些
has
公
a
司
huge impact
的
on the economy
压迫，
because,
要求他们
without
不要
this
让员
freedom
工
of speech,
说话。
it's very difficult for the economy and also the
这
society
对于
to
香港的
thrive,
经济来
because,
说，经济繁荣
in
来
a
说是
sense,
非常
we are
困难的。
already in somewhat of a China situation where
我们现在
people would,
已经是几乎
fear
是一个
for their
中国
safety
城
if
市的
they
感觉，
spoke out, about their
人们
political
不敢表达
stance.
自己的想法，
Just for an
不敢
example,
表达
there
自己
has
的立
been
场。
an
我想举一个例子，
unofficial Hong Kong anthem recently that has been written by
过
a
去
anonymous
最近
songwriter, and
有一位
they
不具
have
名的
opted
歌
to
手
keep
为香
their
港写了
anonymity
一首
because,
类似于是香港
if they have
国
shown
歌
their
的感
faces,
觉。
then most probably they would have been arrested or
他
prosecuted because of on claims of national threats, national
不具名的
security
原因
threats.
就是因为
So
他
that's
担心自
basically
己
the
会被
sentiment
拘
on
捕
the grounds,
所
for
以
Hong
我
Kong.
觉得这一点也表现，这个事件也表现了现在在香港的一种
Last
状
year,
况。
the USCC published a report
去年
concerns that Hong Kong is becoming more likely like any other Chinese city. And that
美
means
国
that
发出
our
了这样
autonomy
的
is
担
already
忧，
gone.
就是
And
香港
actually,
会变
even
成
the
一个
USCC
另一个中国
has
城
issued
市
a。report to claim that the autonomy of Hong Kong is already in danger.
香港的自治正在危险之中。我在面见美国政府的时候，美国政府官员的时候，我会告诉他们，中共已经忽视了中英联国声明，他们已经宣布中英联合声明已经死亡。我希望你们能够通过全球马格尼斯基法案，并呼吁你们的同盟国也通过这样的法案来保护香港。1989年以后，
This has been echoed by the chief executive when she endlessly has been having these kind of ridiculous press conferences where she says nothing. One thing she does say is
林郑月娥多次开新闻发布会，一直在说我们要恢复经济秩序，可是她却完全不提香港的政治问题。所以我想提，香港的经济并不是在完全的造福于香港人民，而是在造福一些巨富。我认为经济应该是为所有人服务的。
And Xinjiang. What autonomy means is no cultural, no language, no history, no right to believe or practice your faith under the Sinicization of religion.
我们只要看一下新疆和西藏的这种所谓自治，就知道中共的自治的概念是什么了。也就是说，你完全无法去坚持自己的信仰，也完全无法坚持你们的文化。他们只想要你变成中国人。什么样的中国人？是习近平概念中的中国人。可是香港是一个非常复杂的地区，他们有着非常复杂的历史和文化。很多人都还在探讨什么叫香港人。我认为自由就是去能够有权利去定义我到底是谁。我认为中共的这种自治根本就不是自治。
The rule of patriots in Hong Kong basically means that there is no substantive high degree of autonomy. Basically, under Xi Jinping, a democratic centralism is practiced. They may solicit input from the Hong Kong government, but once Beijing makes a decision, the SAR government has to implement it.
香港现在的情况是，他们可以参与政府事务，可是如果北京做出了一个决定，那么他们很多时候也并没有办法。
And they believe that one of the major problems, this goes back to 2007, when Hu Jintao told the Hong Kong government on the 10th anniversary that the SAR government had to create a new generation of Hong Kongers who loved one country, two systems, who loved China.
他们需要去制造这样一个新一代的香港人，这样新一代的一个热爱一国两制、热爱中国的一代香港人。
This also touches on Xi Jinping's Chinese Communist identity politics, which is
这也
attempting to
与习近
rehabilitate
平
the spoiled image of the Communist Party and the spoiled image of being a communist. This is why we start seeing laws protecting the national anthem, martyrs and so forth like this.
我们在
So in Hong Kong, which has always been
香港
historically
开始看到一
anti-communist
些
to a large degree,
保护国
there is this
旗、保
effort
护国
related
歌
to
的
the
法
extradition
律。
campaign to eradicate so-called anti-communist sentiment and anti-communist forces.
他们试图
With regards to autonomy,
消除一切
Belt and Road
反共的
and the Greater Bay Area initiatives are key
行为
to
和
China's development program
情
right now,
绪。
and because the central government believes that the major impediment to Hong Kong signing on and strongly supporting these programs has been the two systems, has been its democracy, has been its freedoms, it is now looking to restrict those in order to force the SAR government to support these programs. So once again, in closing, I would say there is no substantive autonomy. Thank you.
我认为在香港现在并没有实质的自治。
Thank you, Mr. Swazi.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Chairman Rubio for holding this hearing. We appreciate you bringing this together. Thank you, Chairman, Representative Smith, Ranking Member Smith, for the work that you've done on this issue for so many years. Thank you to the witnesses. We are so grateful to all of you for the information you've given us here today and for shining a light on this. I know we sit here in this chamber. It's very calm. It's very safe. It's
我
very
们坐在这样
sterile.
一个
And
非
you
常
bring to
宁
life
静的
what's going on in real people's lives right now. When you talk about a 12-year-old being
房间
arrested,
中，
we hear the
你
idea
们
that someone
让
gets
我们
pepper
知
spray
道
sprayed
在
into
香
their
港究竟
wound.
发
We
生
hear
着什
about
么，
people's
如
heads
12
being
岁
smashed
的
into
抗
the
争者
concrete and getting
被
concussions, and we
拘
hear about
捕
the，rubber bullets and the tear
然后
gas
警
and
察
everything
向
else.
已
And
经
people
受
living in
伤
fear on
的
a regular basis
抗
for
争者的
standing
伤
up
口上
for
喷
speaking
胡
their
椒
minds.
喷雾
Here in the
这
United
样的
States
事
of
情。
America, we've believed since Nixon went to China that the more that
从尼克森访
China
华
was
开始，
exposed to our way of life in the United States and to the West, that they would become
我们
more like us. We always thought they'd become, if they saw
我们
capitalism,
一
they
直
saw
以为我们
democracy,
通过
sooner or
和
later
中
they'd become
中
more
中
and
国
more
中共的
like
这
us.
种
And we
交
now
流，能
know
让
that
他们
that's
逐
not
渐
at all
的
the case.
认同我们
Whether
的
the
价
hearings
值。
we've held about the Uyghurs,
可
the
是
hearings about Tibet,
我们现在
or
举
now
办
about
关
Hong
于
Kong,
新
we
疆
know that they're
西
putting-
藏、
we
香
talk
港的
about
听证，
Hong Kong as being one country, two systems. It's really one world with two models, and they're
我
meeting
们
each
说
other
香
in
港
Hong
是一
Kong
国
right
两
now.
制，
And the question is which model is going to win? Is it going to be the model that we
也就是说有
promote
两
here in
种
the
不
United
同
States
的
with the rule of law,
模
with
式
freedom of expression,
那么香港
and with
究竟
democracy,
会走
or is
向
it
哪
gonna
一
be
个模式？到底
authoritarianism
是像
and-
美国
and
一样有
the-
法治、有
the-
自由，
the
还是说
powerful
走向
forces
一
of the
个
government doing whatever they
专
want,
制
whatever
和
they
集
want?
权
They're
的这样
meeting
一
right
个
there,
模
and
式
you're？right in the middle of that challenge
你
right now,
们
so we're
现
so
在
grateful to all of you.
正站在这
So
一
I'm
个挑战的
concerned
正中间
about。the timing of things right now.
我想
You know,
讨
we're
论一下
pushing
时间的
to
问
get
题，
this
实际的问
bill
题。
passed here in the Congress. But right now we've got, I think you talked about it, Joshua, the National Day in
我
China
想
is coming up on
黄
October
之锋，你
1st.
谈到
I'm concerned
10月
about
1
what
日中共的
Mainland
这个
China's actions are going to be in relation to that, and whether there'll be more violence will result as they try to flex their authority.
我
And
想
I'd
问
like
你
to hear each of you talk about that. And the second thing I'm concerned about are the local elections coming up in
当
November.
香港的选
And
举
I want to hear about
11月
from you
就要开始
about
了，我
the,
想了解一下
whether you believe that there's
你
an
们是
opportunity
否
here
相信
for the people
在
of
这
Hong
里
Kong to
会有一
express
个机
themselves,
会
or is there
让
or is the mainland
香港人去
trying
表
to
达他们的
subvert
诉
that
求？
by not permitting certain candidates to run and
还是
and
说
not giving them
中共
permission
有
to
可
run,
能
which is,
会
you know, a foreign idea to hear us here in
中
the
共
United
可
States
能
of America,
会
but so
反
important to
对
all of you.
一些香港的
The
民
third
主派
timing
议员
is
选
let's say a
举，
magic wand was
阻
all
挠
of
一
a
些
sudden
香港的民主派议员
waved.
选举。
And mainland China said, you know, we're going to support the idea of there being elections in the future in Hong Kong for the leader. Instead of Carrie Lam being appointed, it'd be an election by the people. That couldn't happen right away. It would take some time. I'd like to hear what you think about the timing. So let's try
有
and
些
keep it
人
brief.
在
I know
说
I
香
talked a
港
lot
可
myself
能
and used up a lot of
以后会
time.
有
But please just
民主自由，可是
October
这
1st,
需要一些时间，
Election
你们
Day,
怎么看这样的一
and
种说法？
how impactful that can be, and what the timing would be if they were to agree as one of the 5 demands that there would be
你们
universal
认
suffrage.
为他们
So
什么
Joshua,
时
you go
候
first.
会同意你
Apart
们的5大诉
apart
求？
from troops were already moved to the border a few weeks ago, that's the tactics for Beijing authorities to
北
generate the
京
chilling
前一
effect.
阵
We're
子已
strongly
经
aware on
将
how Carrie
军
Lam, the
队
leader
移
of
到
Hong
了
Kong, openly declared
边
that
境香港
she
边
is
境。
considering to impose emergency ordinance in Hong Kong to
然后
stop the
港府也
protests.
在考
Emergency
虑是
ordinance is the
否
colonial
要
era
对
law
香港
similar
实
as
行
martial law. It authorized
紧
the
急
power
法
for。Chief Executive of Hong Kong to shut down the internet, cut the public transport, and
那
even
么
cut the
林
air
郑月
traffic.
娥
We all know
在
that
这样的紧急
political
法
crisis must
下，
solve
她
by
可
political
以
system reform.
关闭
That's the reason we
公
urge
共
Beijing
交通，她
not
可
to
以
handpick
关掉
the
网
leader.
络。
Please let us enjoy the right of free election. But they just conduct and consider to use this kind of martial law before or after the Chinese Chinese National Day. I think that's the reason not only people defense on human rights must care about, even businessmen that focus on enjoying economic freedom and open business environment. They should be aware of how Hong Kong is not only on the brink of bloodshed, it's also under the threat of those martial law and white terror.
他们的利益也将在这样的紧急法下受到侵害。所以，我希望美国国会尽快通过《香港人权与民主法案》。香港的选举将在11月24号举行。我们认为北京将继续采用比较强硬的政策，禁止一些年轻的泛民主派议员进行选举。同时，我会在本月底或者是10月初，公布我自己是否会考虑参加选举。
Dynamic could change because of the protests that are going on?
In District Council, we have
452
seats, and more than 75% of the seats are almost dominated by pro-Beijing camp. And on 24th of November, we hope pro-democratic camp can get a good turnout to show the power of people.
今年的选举，泛民主派能够获得比较大的胜利，来表达民众的诉求。
And what is happening from the people, and it could be a flashpoint. We have to be very conscious of that. Denise, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, personally, I don't feel that October 1st would be something to stop the people from going on to the streets, as the sentiment is still very, very determined and very strong.
我并不认为10月1号这种中共的国庆日会停止，会令香港人停止走上街头。香港人的抗争已经变得越来越有创意，越来越灵活。我们希望。除非港府能够诚恳的、真正的，给我们一个答案，香港的抗争者是不会离开、不会退却的。
I don't think, no, personally, I feel that there are probably already Chinese police among the Hong Kong police.
现在我个人认为，香港的警察队伍中已经有了中共的警察。因为我们已经听到他们在他们的他们之间开始讲普通话，而不是粤语。
Sort of infiltration of the Chinese police into the Hong Kong police force. So,
are you concerned about it escalating around National Day?
你担心10月1号这种抗争的程度？或者冲突的程度会加剧吗？我每天都在担心这种冲突的加剧。警察每天都在巡逻大街，很多年轻人被捕，只是因为他们很年轻，看起来像是抗争者。所以我们也希望国际社会能够密切地关注这个政权，这个习近平政权的做法。我们在保护我们所相信的这些价值，这些普世价值。
Thank you. Sunny?
Yes. Thank you for your question. Personally, I think on the National Day, actually, there will be more escalation on the movement. And because I know that the Chinese authority must want the Hong Kong people to try to respect the National Day. But on the other hand, Hong Kong protesters, they also know that it's important to have some symbolic movement on the National Day.
这个所谓的国庆日，可是抗争者也懂得，他们需要一些象征性的行为，具有象征意义的行为。
the emergency law or send out the PLA to come to Hong Kong, because currently China relies on Hong Kong very much.
我认为现在中共非常的依赖香港，很多的外国投资是从香港进入的。如果他们试图动用紧急法来镇压香港的抗争的话，我认为北京当局不会这样做，不会采用军队镇压的做法。
I think a couple of things I think is really important that hasn't been raised. In addition to the question of infiltration and use of decoys, last August 2018, the People's Daily announced the establishment of the Greater Bay Area Police Cooperation Mechanism among Guangdong, Hong Kong, and Macau.
中共宣布了这样一种香港、广东和澳门警察的一种合作。
Hong Kong police personnel in Guangdong. This has been followed up on. And one of the questions I think is important to press either through the UN systems is to raise the question of really what kind of training. I am pretty sure that the training did not include international standards on appropriate use of force.
我认为这样的培训一定不包括如何正确的使用武力。
The UN special experts just last week issued a joint statement about concern and also raising these questions of the need to make the police, the Hong Kong police, there are very sophisticated, detailed standards on the use of force, that you're supposed to de-escalate, not escalate, you're supposed to reduce harm, not create harm, and that there is a whole range of police crowd control mechanisms, and they're supposed to choose according to proportionality. So I wanted to just emphasize that. On the timing of National Day, I think we can't lose sight of the fact that Xi Jinping is not as powerful as we may think or as he would like us to think. And that it is true that with the consolidation of power, etc., no term limit now both of the key positions. The fact is, what you're getting to see, the tea leaves, if you look a little more closely, is that the party leaders inside are not happy with the way that Xi Jinping has, quote, handled the Hong Kong situation. And how do we know this? We know this because Carrie Lam, the chief executive, on Monday, I believe, said, no withdrawal, no, etc. I withdrew it, no formal. 2 days later, that kind of disingenuous explanation, I have heard the Hong Kong people. For goodness sakes, it's been 2 months. If you can't hear 2 million, 3 million people, so why in 2 days did she suddenly say, I will now formally? So, Xi Jinping is actually in a lose-lose situation. It's a no-win situation. He's stuck between the hardliners, who I am pretty much concerned about, are pushing for military force, because he has already shown he's failed. Deng Xiaoping took 2 months, shut down the whole 89 student and the democracy and free trade union movement. We are now in the 3rd month, so under the party's dead time frame on how you can handle these mass disputes, he has failed. So he's in a pretty situation. October 1st. This is not any anniversary. This is the 70th anniversary. So they have invested years worth of enormous investment in film festival, special documentaries made. They have said that no Chinese documentaries in the Chinese TV recently. They have to show the history, etc. There's an enormous amount of investment to keep the legitimacy and have a wonderful birthday celebration for the country. So he's stuck.
通过这种巨大的投资来证明其政权的合法性。
And the others who are saying, there's got to be a way to handle this, not the way you're doing it, because now we look terrible. Now we look like the thugs we are. And so I think that is what we should be monitoring are the messages. And just last week, a very strange editorial appeared in Xiushu, which is one of the major party organs. And in Xiushu, the editorial pointed out something very strange. It said, whether a country's political, this is our translation, sorry. Whether a country's political system is democratic and effective, one needs to mainly look at whether the country's leadership ranks can rotate or alternate, BNT, in accordance with the law in an orderly fashion. What does this mean? We don't know, because just the fact that the Constitution eliminated the term limits for the top office doesn't mean he'll stay. So I think there are some other wild cards that are on the table that we need to keep an eye on in terms of how the US government can think about the options and policy options. Of course, we support the legislative initiatives. This is very important, but I think there's something much bigger underway in
我
terms of
当
the
然支
politics in
持这些
Beijing
法
that will
案，可是我觉
absolutely have
得
an impact on the
北
decisions
京
that will be
有一些
made
更深层的原
pre-October
因，
1st and after.
非常的值得我们
Thank you.
的
Dan, I've taken
探
up too
究
much。time. I'm going to move on to.
We'll let Dan.
You want to let Dan go?
All right. Why don't we hold and we'll go to Senator Young.
I just have a statement to make, and I regret I'm going to have to leave after this, but I wanted to say thank you, Mr. Wong. Thank
我
you,
可能
Ms. Ho,
将
for
很
your
快离开，可
courage,
是我
for
想
your
说，
resolve,
非
for your
常感谢
leadership
你
in the face
洪
of
志峰也非常
great
感谢
trial
你
and
何律师
tribulation.
感谢你们的勇
Thank
气
you for the example you are setting
感
for
谢
the world
你
and
们
for all that you're
为
doing
世
for
界做
freedom
出的这样的一个
loving
范
peoples.
例
I
榜
want to send a
样。
message to Beijing's communists. And my message is you cannot have it both ways. You cannot seek to trade with the wealthy
是说，
nations
你们
of
不
the
能
world and
两
rip off our
两头都
intellectual
占，
property.
你们
You
不能
cannot
一
seek
边
to be a trusted international development partner and engage in predatory economic practices through your Belt and Road
不能
Initiative.
在一边专政的
And
同
you
时，一边又
cannot
在利用
reap
着自
all
由
the
贸易。
economic benefits that you enjoy under American law of Hong Kong
你们
special status
不能
while
利用
undermining
美国法律
your
对于
rights as
给
Hong Kong
给予香港的这种优
while
惠待遇，
eradicating your political
同时
identity. We cannot
又
allow
在
this to happen.
香港
So
实
I
施
look
这样
forward to
的
working with
政
you.
治镇
I
压。
will be signing on to the legislation
我
offered
想
by
说
the，co-chairman
我
of
会
this committee
签，
as you
我
have
会
encouraged us to
支
do
持
so.
这
And
两
I'll
个
be
法
seeking
案。
other opportunities,
同
perhaps
时
in
我
the
也会
immigration area, to
在
provide
比如说
further
移民
relief
方案，
to Hong
看
Kongers
如何能
who
够
do not want to be
更
a
好的帮
part
助香港人，
of this predatory
看去帮助那些不想成
regime
为
that calls
这
itself
个
communist, but in fact is
专制政
really
权
fascist
体
in
制下
many
的人的
respects.
香港，我想去帮助这些香港
And we
人。
must continue to press it to change its behavior. Thank you so much for your
我
presence here.
们需要继续坚持让中共改变他们的做法。
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is no disputing the fact that under Xi Jinping, human rights abuses have seriously worsened. You named
在习
the
近平
area
统治下，
from
中国的人
torture,
权状
religious
况、
freedom. This home you talked about
宗
the
教自由状
civilization
况
of
都恶化。
religions where every
很
single
多
religion or
宗
faith,
教
including the Falun Gong,
包括法
Christians,
轮
Tibetan
功
Buddhists, the Uyghurs, all
西
have to
藏
comport to
都
the
受到了迫
communist
害，
model or else face severe torture, incarceration, and even
都
death.
受到了酷刑折
It
磨
is incredible
以及
what
关
he
押
is doing and his regime, and of course all of
中
that
共
will
政
be
权的这
imposed
种
on
做法
Hong Kong
非常的令人
unless
难以
there
置
is a
信。
reversal of this trend. On human trafficking, the Trump administration has
在
designated China as a tier 3 country because of sex and labor
人
trafficking.
口贩
It has gotten
人口贩卖
seriously
这个问
worse
题上
over the last several years.
川普政
So
府
every
已
place you
经
look,
点出了
it is
中共。
worse. Xi Jinping is bringing dishonor to himself and to his government with his abuse of people. And I think we need to say that loud and clear. You know, the great father of democracy, Wei Jingsheng, once said, and I had him at a hearing, and I actually met him in Beijing when he was let out briefly to get Olympics 2000, which the Chinese government didn't get. So they rearrested him and beat him almost senseless. Well, he said, you know, you Westerners don't get it.
我
You
想
do coddle dictatorship. You do allow and enable by
引
your
用一位
weakness.
中
You
国
gotta
人
look
权人
a
士的说
dictatorship
法。
in the eye
他说你
and
们
say,
西方人
we're
根
not
本就
kidding.
不理解。
Conditionality of human rights either occurs or we're not going to be trading with you and allowing you to use that economic power that you get to further incarcerate and further repress. You know, the lessons of the Soviet Union were not learned
我
when
们
it came to China.
在
I got elected in 1981. My
与
first trip was
苏
to
联
Moscow
冷战的
and
这个教
Leningrad
训，我
on
们
behalf of
好像
Soviet
都没有
Jews.
学到，都
And
没
frankly,
有
the Reagan administration
利用这些
stood
教
up
训
strongly,
都没有
to
利用
the
好这些教
powers
训，
in
在处理中国的
Moscow
问题。
and said human rights matter.
人权
And
是
it
非
did
常
matter,
重
and
要
we,
的。
thankfully, we saw a change. Of course, under Putin, it's still bad, but not as bad as it was during those years.
尽管
I
俄
raised
罗
all
斯
of that
现在
because
在
when it came to China,
普
we have
京的
not
统治
learned
下
the lessons
人
of
权非常的
conditionality with
状
regards
况
to
非常
human
不好，可
rights.
是也不
And
像
I say that
在
with
苏联时
sadness.
期那样。
With
可是我们
great
在
sadness. You know,
中国
when we
这个
did the
问题上，
comprehensive anti-apartheid
我们
act
没
in
有学到我们的
1986,
教训。
not only did I vote for it, but we had a world coalition saying this egregious behavior will not be tolerated. Therefore, we're going to
我们需要停止向中共或者是港府提供武器。
And Mr. Garrett, you might want to speak to that. But we've got to be serious
我们需要严肃
about
起
all of
来。
this. And I just bring this up because it deeply concerns me that we just keep
我
not
非
learning
常
the
的担
lessons.
忧，
Nancy
因为我们这么
Pelosi,
多年来，我
Frank
们都没有
Wolf,
学到
David
教
Bonnier
训。
and I all opposed MFN for China after Tiananmen Square. George Herbert Walker Bush thought he could manage the whole thing. He was our
当
ambassador
时
to
天安
China.
门学
And
生
as it turned out,
中共
we
动压
managed it
军队镇压
extraordinarily
学生的
poorly.
时候，
Bill Clinton
我
came
们
in and he
就
said,
想
let's
对
link human rights
中
with
共
MFN trade. 1 year later, he
中共
delinked
采
it.
取强硬的政策。
And the lesson learned by the
可是
dictatorship
当时
in
的总统
Beijing
布什
was
并不这样想。
Trump human rights. We now, and I have tried for 5 years to get my bill passed. Our
现在
bill, it's a
我
collective
已
bill,
经
House and Senate.
5年来，我一直在不停的努力，试
And
图
the
通
same
过这
people
场
who said
法律。
just trade more, and somehow China will
然
matriculate
后
from
还是有
dictatorship
人说，
to
我们只是
democracy
需要与
have
中
been
共进行
proven
更多
wrong
的贸
again.
易往来，他们
And
的
if
人
it
权
wasn't
状
for
况
the
会
great people
自
of
然
Hong
的
Kong
就
standing up so
变好。
powerfully at great loss of their liberty, going to
可是
prison,
香港
being arrested,
已
being
经失
harassed,
去了
and even killed,
香港人已经
tortured,
付出了如此大的
then
代
this
价，失
Congress
去了
needs to wake up and say,
逐渐
finally
的
at
失去
long
他们的
last,
自由。
we're going to put conditionality on this. So if you want to speak to that, I would appreciate it. There have been 1,000 arrests since the activities occurred.
从
What
运
is
动
the
开始，
status
已
of the
经有
prosecutions?
1000多人被
Joshua, we know your
抓
case,
捕。
but there are many other cases that are in
我想
obscurity
了解
right
一下
now. What is
现
happening to
在
those individuals?
他
And
们
just generally on the
的现
police,
状是如何
are the
的。
police largely newer recruits who are more
这些
ideologically
警察他们
aligned
是
with
刚刚
Beijing?
被雇
Or
佣
are
的
they
吗？
the
他们
old
是
hands
更
who
加
have
亲
just now
共的
become
吗？
even more repressive than they had been
所以
in
他
the
们才
past?
会
If you could speak
变
to
得
those
这
things,
样
I'd appreciate it.
更加具有压迫性吗？
With more than 1,500 Hong Kong were arrested in the past 3 months. More
在
than
过去几个
200
月
of them
中，
were
超过
prosecuted
500
already.
人
I'm
被
among one of
拘
them,
捕，已
and
经
we're
有
also
超过
aware on
200人已经
some
被起
of
诉。
those activists were already detained inside prison before any trial start. And that's
他
the
们
sugar-coated
在
rule of law and the Hong
过
Kong
堂之
style
前已经被
legal
关押在了
system
监狱
under
里
the
面。
pressure of Beijing.
这是
I've
来
been
自北
arrested
京的
and
压力。
prosecuted with the charges of
我
unauthorized assembly. Even
我
I've
曾经
experienced
因
to be
为
jailed for around 120 days, but the price I pay
发起
is
集
just a
会
small piece of cake.
发起非法
Because
集
lots
以
of
发起
our
非法集会的
teammates,
罪名
I,
而被拘捕，可
from
是我只
my
是参加了这样一
understanding,
个
more
集
than
会。
100 of them face the riot charges, might be locked up in prison for more than 10 years. 5 years ago,
这
during the
些
umbrella
被拘
movement,
捕
we
的
were
抗
just
议人士有
arrested
可能
by
面临10
unlawful
年，
assembly.
最高
We could
10
face
年的
maybe
监禁。
months or 1 to 2 years in jail. But now, youngsters at the age of 15, they should enjoy their summer holiday. They should spend the
现在
time,
15
more
岁
time
左右这些
in
年
the
轻人
summer
本来
vacation
应
with
该
their friends and
去享受
family.
他们的
But
暑
now they are
假
the，ones
去和
being
家人和
prosecuted
朋友在一
and
起。可
need
是
to
他们
face a
现在却
trial
在被政
and
府
maybe
起
from
诉，
15 or 16
甚
at the
至
age,
将
the
面
golden
临
year
在这样一个黄
for
金的年
themselves,
龄，
might be already need to be
将要
locked up
面
in
临
prison.
监禁这
And
样的危
also we
险。
have activist Edward Leung
同
who
时，
fight
我
for
们也有
Hong
一
Kong's
些
freedom.
抗议人
Already
士
being locked up in prison, need to face 6 years in prison.
也
Apart
面
from
临
the
着
massive
6年的监禁。
arrest
这样
and
的刑罚。
prosecution, it seems to be the tactics for Beijing to silence our voice. But
这
with
是
how our
这
movement
是
still keep
北
our
京
momentum,
试图
just like 2 weeks ago,
压
more
迫我
than
们声音的一种
200,000
做
Hong
法。
Kongers marched towards U.S. consulate in Hong Kong, urged to pass the
所
bill
以前
and
一
to show the
阵我
global
们
solidarity.
很多的抗争
We're
者
also aware that
嗯
the cabinet
在
of chief
美国
executive,
驻港
which means
的
member from the executive council,
驻港机构
last
附
week
近游
openly
行。
declared that Hong Kong's chief executive enjoy the right to appoint any secret police. Secret police is not the terms created by activists or created by
香
journalists.
港的林郑
It's
月娥有
the
权
terms
指
written
派
in the
秘密
current
警
ordinance
察。
and regulation. It could authorize the power for Hong Kong chief executive to appoint anyone,
他
no matter
允
they
许
live in Hong
香
Kong,
港的
they live in
特
mainland,
首
or live in
委
they
派
or they have
任何
within
人，
any
无
kind
论
of
是香港
background.
人
They can
还
be appointed to be the Hong Kong
大陆
police force
人
and continue to use life-threatening
作
force
为
to
警
crack
队的一
down
部
on our
分。
protests. And that's the white terror and why all of us will describe
这就是
Hong
香
Kong
港
as
的
a police
现
state.
在的白色恐怖统治。
I would like to add to the fact that among those who have been arrested and charged for riot, a lot of them
暴动罪被起诉或被拘捕的一些人，很多人他们根本就不是站在前线的这些人，他们只是恰巧站在附近。有一些是急救人员，有一些是在帮助人、帮助抗争者的人，有一些是社工。他们所以这种是对香港人来说，对这种港府的做法非常的震惊。我还想说，香港的形势正在扩展到世界各地。中共这种通过钱、通过晋升来压迫反抗声音的做法，已经输出到了全世界。比如说，在澳洲，如一个政府机构，他们试图防止我试图断绝与我的联系。如在加拿大，香港的一位活动者也被禁止参加一个游行。他们中共试图用钱、用商业来将这种压迫输出到商界，然后输出到雇主的头上，然后雇主再输出到雇员的头上。这也就是为什么我们这场抗争运动，大部分人都是无名的运动，他们不会说出自己的名字，因为不想被以暴动和非法集会的罪名被起诉。我想说
，Actually, the Human Rights Council of the United Nations has decried the public order ordinance, which is a colonial law in Hong Kong. The Department of Justice and police force in Hong Kong, they can use this public order ordinance to prosecute those protesters with a very easy way. That means that once if the DOJ, the Department of Justice, or the police force, they try to use the public order ordinance to prosecute the protester, and then actually it's very difficult for them to be not sued as guilty. And that's why this law should be abolished by the government. And we urge that actually the international society should also be aware about this law. And apart from that,
被判无罪，所以我认为这条法律应该被废除。
I had a tutorial kid, and then
我认识一个小朋友，一位年轻人，他在抗争中被
And that kid was when that kid was arrested, and
当这个年轻人被逮捕的时候，他立刻就向这个警察
Can he call his lawyer? And the police officer
他很快就问这个警察说：“我可不可以打电话给我的律师？”然后这个警察就告诉他说：“你不可以打电话给你的律师，因为我想要折磨你，因为我想要让你受苦。”然后这个警察对一个非常非常年轻的年轻人说这样一句话。这也是为什么香港人对警察的行为如此的愤怒，如此的沮丧。
The prosecutions is related to not only the imposition of the public order, but ordinance. It has to be an unlawful assembly. So the way in which the notice of no objection process contributes to that, that's the tool. And the tool is Hong Kongers then face this ridiculous situation where they have to have the police deny the application for a notice of no objection for a file for a peaceful assembly
尽管他们试图进行反抗警方暴力的和平集会，可是警方会拒绝批准这样的集会。
So that's really important that through this kind of misuse of that process, they are
那么
really
警方和
violating
政府
international standards
在
for
滥
peaceful
用这样
assembly
的
by imposing
集
this
会的这
kind
种
of
法律程序。
unduly restrictive administrative procedure. The police, under this procedure, then can act rampantly as both enforcement, prosecutor.
所以
Because
他
they're
们
naming
在
this, saying this is a riot. But
拒
a
绝
riot is
批
a
准这
legal
样的
process.
集会了
It's for the court
之
to
后，
look
他
at
们
the
就可
evidence.
以
It's for the
使
court
用
to see if this person
使用
engaged
武力
in
来驱散
illegal
人权。
behavior and violent, etc. So right now, the police are acting as enforcement, prosecution, and executioner of orders, and that is part of the problem with looking at when we talk about and on top of that, we have politicized decision making by the prosecution. This was also noted by independent UN experts maybe 2 years ago, saying that they were concerned about a potential pattern of
联合国的一些专家在几年前就已经发出这样的
There is an issue regarding whether or not Hong Kongers can get a fair trial in Hong Kong in the future.
现在香港人是否能够得到公平的一个司法程序，是值得讨论的一个问题。
Whether it is in Chinese state media organizations or it is in so-called mainstream organizations who quote them and cite them ubiquitously. So when the Chinese regime characterized demonstrators as separatist, extremist, terrorists. This is already setting an expectation for the Hong Kong judiciary to act, not just as well as law enforcement, not only in the charges that they decide to lay against a protester, but also the sentences that they're trying to get after people. The pro-Beijing United Front movement in Hong Kong has been very aggressive in attacking judges that it feels that have been too lenient.
在香港的一些亲共者一直在攻击那些
refer to them as yellow judges, referring to the yellow ribbons from the Umbrella Revolution.
在攻击那些同情抗议者的法官，或者是没有给抗议者非常高的刑罚的法官。
that have gone unprosecuted. So this is a real issue. Also,
这是一个很大的问题。
Oathgate intervention by the National People's Congress. There's an expectation that Hong Kong judges have to uphold the national security of the Communist Party. So if you render a decision that's inconsistent with that national security expectation, you may be vulnerable to disqualification. Now, this has not happened, but this is the logic that is being used to disqualify candidates at the district council, the legislative council elections, and so forth. Regarding the police, touching on Sharon's comments earlier, the Hong Kong police also went to Xinjiang as observers to learn on how they handled
香港的警队也被中国邀请到了新疆去观摩。
There was some interaction with them. The Hong Kong PLA garrison commander observed some of their passing out their parades and so forth like that. But one of the most dangerous and I think terrifying things for most Hong Kongers is that the Hong Kong police now
香港的警察现在他们不穿警服，他们不带警员证，你很有可能在街上被拘捕，你在家中被拘捕，没有人知道这个警察是谁，你也不知道这个警察他到底是不是香港警察，还是说来自中国大陆的一些绑架者。 也就是，所以我认为这一点对香港的法治非常的具有危害性。他们现在想做什么就可以做什么。香港警察曾经被视为。
Senator King.
Mr. Chairman, Representative McAdams was here long before I arrived, so I'll defer to him.
Mr. McMahon, yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Senator. Today marks a significant day in United States history. It was 232 years ago on this very day that our forefathers signed the United States Constitution. So it's, I think with some significance that we welcome you here today to the United States Congress, the House and the Senate, to share your testimonies and as you share in this struggle, this global struggle of humanity for freedom and independence. So that Constitution signed 232 years ago today created a federal system, one with a Senate and a House that oftentimes, by design, there's some tension between these two bodies. It created 3 branches of government, an executive branch, a legislative branch, and a judicial branch. It's an outgrowth of that system as our 2 political parties that oftentimes also struggle for our ideas to move forward. It created a system of a federal system with now 50 states, but also there's a healthy tension, sometimes unhealthy, but there's a tension between that system as we struggle to move forward ideas and the rule of law. One thing that I think is important to note, though, is that we all stand together. This is a legislative and executive branch that we stand together, Republicans and Democrats, in support of the struggle for human rights, for the rule of law, and for freedom for Hong Kong. And I would echo the sentiments that have been expressed earlier, that we cannot have it both ways. We cannot have a rule of law and human rights and the struggle for freedom with the actions that we see that are undermining the very nature of that system in Hong Kong today. And so it's incredibly troubling to me to see what we have seen play out over the last 6 months. And forecasting into the future some of the efforts to undermine the sanctuaries of democracy and human rights that we see right now. So some of those sanctuaries and foundations of freedom, as we've seen in the United States and we also see in Hong Kong, the freedom of democracy and government through elections, the freedom of academia and for ideas to thrive in an academic system, the economic freedom for individuals and economic competition, and rule of law where every individual is treated fairly and equally under the law, and human rights are protected. So my concern, what I'd love for you to comment on, is where we go from here, and with some very troubling signs on the horizon. So I'd like you to comment on Mr. Wong. And let me commend all of you who are examples and the founders of freedom, whose names I hope will be remembered 232 years from now in the struggle for freedom in Hong Kong. But Mr. Wong, Ms. Ho, Mr. Chung, and Ms. Hom, for your efforts and struggles for Hong Kong. I'd love for you to comment on, first of all, Mr. Wong, the struggle in elections for individuals to step forward. Over the last several years, the government, as you referenced, has repeatedly rejected the nomination of candidates running for political office who have supported or been affiliated with self-determination. What challenges does that impose today and going forward for individuals who are willing to put themselves and their names forward? Taking that same look at the foundations of freedom of thought to academia, what support our academic institutions give to students as they raise their voices in support of intellectual freedom and human rights, and also to the economy and free economy as businesses. Ms. Ho, I believe, as you spoke about some of the concerns with Cathay Pacific and efforts that undermine individuality and freedom of thought in the marketplace of ideas and in the workplace. What is happening in these respective spheres and foundations of democracy, and how can we best support freedom of thought?
So, just let me explain what's on the mind of the young generation. In the past few years after the end of umbrella movement, lots of youngsters, no matter they uphold different kind of political belief, they still have the awareness and consensus. They hope their voice can be heard inside the institution. Apart from talk to the street, joining protests, it's also significant for us for push forward political system and election reform. Unfortunately, with those political censorship, even I'm considering to run for office and I will make the formal announcement on late of
个人也在考虑
September
是否
or
要参
early
加选
October.
举。我
I
最终
still
会
aware
在
that
本
how
月底
Beijing
或
hope
下
to
月初
bar
做
the
出
whole generation
做
of
出
youngsters
宣布
to。enter the institution. But it's lucky that with the determination
我觉得
and courage of Hong
我们
Kongers, they just turned the
香港
whole
人非
generation
常的
of
有勇
youngsters to
气
be dissident. And not only the generation of baby boomers,
整
even
个
the
这
generation
个
of
年
Gen
轻一代
X
都变成
and
了
millennials,
异议人
all
士
they joined the fight with solidarity and unity. So I
他
would
们
just
都
make it clear,
团结起
Hong Kong
来
is not
在
only suffering from the
抗
political
争。
crisis, we are
我想
also
说
suffering from the
香
humanitarian
港
crisis,
不仅是
especially
在
how
有
Hong
经历
Kong
一场
police
政治
force
危机，我们
just
也在经历一
hardly
场人道主
hardline
义危
suppress on
机。
us. No matter the sexual harassment experienced by a young
包
lady
括
arrested
一些
or how
女性
injured
的抗争者
protester
在
would be
被
pulled
拘捕
down
过
from
程
the
当中受到
ambulance
了
by riot
性
police
侵扰。
directly, or how arrested person is really difficult for them and being refused to contact lawyer or even seek for any kind of
很
medical
多
treatment.
被拘捕的
I
人
think this kind of hardline
被拒绝
suppression
给予
would just turn
联
whole
系
of
律师的
my
权利。
generation and the generation younger than
我
me,
想
no
说，
matter on
像
the
我
street or
这
get
么大
inside
的
the
年轻一
institution,
代，
we will keep on
我们
together
会
with
继
this
续
uphill battle, and we hope the U.S. Congress can stand with Hong
我们
Kong.
会继续坚持这一场非常困难的战斗。我们希望美国的国会也给予我们支持。
I'll go. So yes, on the cultural side, and also
在
on
文化
the
上
freedom of thought
在思
side
想
of
自由
things,
上
it has been 90% of it probably has been eroded,
几乎
where
90%的
at
这
least
种
the whole
自由已
show
经受到了
business
侵害。
has been
至少在娱乐界
is in the control of the communist government.
娱乐界已
Me
经完
along
全
with
在中共的
just
统治下
a very
了。
small handful of
包括我在
actors
内
and
的一
singers
小部分
have spoken up for these movements, but the rest of the celebrities, they have kept their silence,
包括我在内的
and
一
they
小
have
部
been
分
forced
艺
into
人
participating in these
已经
support
对这个事件
campaigns
提
on
出了
social
抗议。可
media
是有很
of,
多的
I
这个
support
香港的
the
艺
Hong Kong
人
police,
在
or
社交
I
媒
am
体
the
上支
protector
持
of
香港
the
政府，
national
支持
flag
香港警察。
campaigns, where they have to voice out their
他们
support to
不
the
得不
Chinese government, or
宣布
else
他们
they would
对
be
中共的这样的支持， 否则的话，他们就将受到审查，他们就将受到中共的迫害。
businesses, of course, they have been
所以
pressured also
我想商
into
界他们当然就是商业界也有
freedoms of
遇
Hong
到非
Kongers,
常大的
namely
这种压力。
MTR, our subway system,
比
they
如
have
港
closed
铁
down
他们关闭
stations
了
in times of
一些地铁
protest,
站，他们在抗争期间关闭
making
了一
it
些
very
地铁
easy
站
for the police to arrest
这样的
people
话
and also very difficult
警
for
察
the
就会
people
非常
to
容易
leave the
的可以去
sites.
逮捕一
And
些
that
抗
was
争
a
者。
result of I believe it was an article that was in the People's Daily, the
我
state
想这
newspaper,
一点
where
是
they have named
由
the
人民日报的
MTR
一个文
corporation,
章
saying that they
引
have
起
been
的。
helping the people. So I do think that in a free society, these
我认为在一个
businesses
自由的社会当
and
中，
corporations, they do have a
这种
obligation, a social responsibility to keep up this kind of integrity, to at least to safeguard our freedoms, which they have failed to do so.
在一个自由社会中，这些机构本
Like right
应该
now,
去
we
保障
do
我们的自由，
do
可是他
not
们
have
并没有做到。
much solutions to these problems
现
because
在我们对这种问题并没有太
aside
多
of
的
the
解决
people
办法。
protesting,
除了
these
抗争之
businesses,
外，
they are exercising their suppression onto
这些
their
商界的
people.
人，
So,
他们在
we
将他们受到的这种压力
hope that
传
this Hong
再一
Kong
次
Human Rights and
压到这个香
Democracy
港人民的
Act
身上。
with these sanctions on the government officials, and hopefully
我
if
希望
this could extend
比如
to
说，如
these
果能够
corporations
去
who have been
制裁香
violating
港这些迫害
the
人权的
basic
官
law,
员，
the freedom of speech and of the people, hopefully that this
我
would
希望这种情况将
be
会
monitoring the
至少
businesses and also of course the
获得关
government
注。
institutions in Hong Kong.
From the academic perspective, I believe we
从
still
学术
have
界来
we need
讲
to have a
我
correct
认
understanding
为
on China
我
first.
们
Because
需要
in
对中国有一个
1989,
正
when
确的理
Professor
解。
Fukuyama famously declared that this is the end of the history because he believed democracy is the ultimate form of human government, and all the ideology, communism or other authoritarianism will have no place in the coming world. But apparently, 2 decades after he gave his speech, he's wrong. And we cannot still using the mindset of the old times that we should continue the engagement policy towards China. We should abandon the engagement policy and try to use a more assertive way, try to understand China. Because in the campus, we know that Chinese government they try to establish a lot of Confucius Institute around the world, and by that Confucius Institute, they are creating propaganda, try to influence the youth in other countries, including your kids. And this is not reasonable. Canada government last year they started to shut down some of the Confucius institutes.
现在有一些海外政府已经采取了一些措施去关闭这样一些孔子学院，因为我支持他们这样的做法，因为这是在维护学术自由。那么中共肯定是不同意这一点的。香港人在过去几个月之内
across the globe, in Australia, in UK, in US, they have received a lot of threatening letters and
我们在过去也受到了很多学术界的支持，包括海内外。
And that's why we need all the few countries, including US, to support
所有的自由国家来支持香港，
to support the academic freedom in the long run.
去支持香港的学术自由。
I think the question that all of this also is related to is China's clear exercise of soft, hard, and sharp power. And so I want to say a couple of things on the academic front.
这个问题是在问中国通过软硬不同的手段去增强它的影响力。
I think Joshua saw recently close up and personal when he spoke at Columbia what the actions
黄之锋最近在哥伦比亚大学演讲的时候，应该也已经看到了中国大陆学生的一些反应。我想这个问题并没有一个很假。可是我想，我们应该如何去实施这样一个，就是我们支持、欢迎中国学生来到美国学习。可是，我知道有一些来自中国大陆留学生根本就不敢上我的课，因为他们感到非常的害怕，因为他们知道我是一个中国人权执行主任。
So I'm saying that the censorship is on mainland students as well.
我想说，这种中共的这种审查也是施加到了中国大陆留学生的身上的，所以他们也是在这样的监控之下的。
And in particular, as the Protect Hong Kong Act moves forward in discussions, and I know that it's going through a legislative process. I think it would be really good to think about and address the question of U.S. companies, because not only will the denial of export licenses really address the issue, it will address the issue of no longer being complicit, but will it address the issue of the actual category of lethal and non-lethal materials? And I wanted to point out that China hosts the China International Exhibition on Police Equipment every 2 years. The next one, they all held in Beijing, will be held on May 12th to the 15th. That's a really important date. And they sell, and they have thousands of exhibitors from all over the world and companies. And in the past, we have been monitoring many U.S. companies have gone to exhibit and sell, and then afterwards report very proudly on the Are we singing? Not yet, right? Okay, not yet, not singing yet. But they've also reported on the millions of dollars of contracts that they were able to secure in Beijing. So I think one thought might be to, aside from or in addition to export licenses, what about technology transfer? What about collaboration? What about them training the Chinese partner companies? What are the other things that need to be in place so that, because China has been named an economic competitor for the U.S., it's not an even playing field. They're an economic competitor where the SOEs are dominating the economy. You are not investing in all your U.S. companies, but China is investing in all the key industries, and that is technology, AI,
各种各样的关键领域投资，如人工智能、金融、军事等领域。
So I want to ask one final thought for what can be done going forward. Next year on the Human Rights Council, at the end of this year, China rotates off, and according to the rules, can't come back on in 2020. I think that is the year in which the U.S. government, I know you have left the Council for various analyses of its effectiveness, but that does not take away the fact that the U.S. is still viewed as a leading player among all the member states in the Council. You can exercise your role as an observer. You can also exercise your very influential role in working with other democratic governments to issue joint statements, joint initiatives, and joint. So I think 2020 is particularly important, and in particular, that is the year to push, because you're also on the NGO committee of ECOSOC. That is the year to support and push for the reforms that are needed to allow independent civil society groups to be able to participate. As you know, my organization had applied for ECOSOC status, and over the last 30 years, and both times you can't make it out of the NGO committee because China just looks at us and goes, and that's it. It's end of story. So I think it's very important that the U.S. can raise the issues not only as an observer in Human Rights Council, but in the General Assembly. And I know you're quite active on the third committees. That's where I think it's really important to exercise leadership. 2020
进行更多的参与，同时也在联合国大会上能够有更多的参与。
threatening everybody else to support them while they're not there, but the point is they won't have a vote. So I think it's a good year to get some traction.
I'll just make a couple quick comments. One is U.S. has law enforcement cooperation with the Hong Kong police, and this may need to be reconsidered or looked at more strongly in the future. Second, basically as far as companies go in Hong Kong, there's a one country, two systems apartheid-like system where patriotic companies are privileged over other companies. If you happen to be a pro-democracy supporter,
在香港有这样一个情况，就是那些所谓的爱国的公司，他们会享受到更好的待遇。
If I remember my count correctly, there's 7 public ones. They're all funded by the SAR government. So this puts on pressure
香港有非常多的大的公司是接受来自中共驻港办公室的这个资金的。
A sensitive personality such as Benny Tai, or researching sensitive issues that may or may not be clearly evident. There's also a lot of things that happens on Hong Kong related to academic and other freedoms that are above the water and below the water line.
学术界也有非常多的事情发生。
Police are doing right now are ID checks.
比如香港。
So even if you're not arrested, your name is being recorded and associated.
香港的警察现在在抗争，在集会地点附近搜查人们的身份证。那么，即使你可能不是抗争者，那么你的身份信息也会被录入。
Discussed such a possibility back, I think it was around 2014 or 2012. And my last comment would be that Chinese state-owned enterprises incorporated in Hong Kong should not be treated as Hong Kong companies.
我想，还有一点就是中国大陆的这种公司，在港的公司不应该被看作是和香港的公司一样的。
Senator King.
Thank you, Ms. Holm. I'm struggling with the fact that we've got an island of democracy in a sea of repression.
我觉得我们现在在一个压迫的这样一个汪洋大海中，有一个小岛是有民主和自由的。
You've got Hong Kong. You've got two societies moving in the opposite direction.
这两个社会在向两个完全不同的方向在行驶，在前进着。
As a practical matter, as a practical matter, there's 7 million, I understand, Hong Kongers and almost.
那么香港有700万人，你认为有没有什么实际的办法？
The other piece that I wanted to ask is there any sympathy for the Hong Kongers within the mainland?
另一个
Is
我
there
想
a
问的问题
nascent,
是，中国大陆内部
call
有
it
没
a
有一些
democracy
同情
movement,
香港的
at
人？
least a freedom of
有没有
expression
人
movement,
一些
or
有
is
没有
the
人
government in
对于
such
香
firm
港人
control
这
that's a
种对于
fantasy?
言论自由
Give me a
的、对于
picture
民
of
主的
where
追
this
求有一
goes.
些同情？我想了解一下这个问
Thank you.
题。
Though I have no answers because this is an
我可能
ongoing
没
struggle,
有
but I do want to say that
一
the
个
control
完整的
state,
答案，
you've put
可
your
是我
finger
想
right on
说，
it. A control state is China has built a whole ecosystem of control through the technology.
中共政府它通过科技、通过法律，已经建立了一个完整的这种控制性的这种系统，然后让人们进行自我审查，让人们互相举报。这是一个整个的一个生态系统，这种思想控制。同时，还有这种非常不对等的权利。
Notwithstanding the mass crackdowns on lawyers, notwithstanding the torture on the mainland, notwithstanding the killing of untold thousands in 1989 of tanks, they have not, the Communist Party has not been able to shut down people.
尽管这种权利的权利，一方是人权活动人士被极力的迫害，一方是强大的中共政权，可是这么多年来，中国政权并没有成功的使这些声音真正的消失，使这些反对的声音真正的消失。
That has over 100,000 people every year on June 4th remembering. It was Hong Kong students, it was Hong Kong journalists who went up to Beijing to support the democracy movement.
1989年的时候，香港有非常多的学生和记者到北京去支持这种北京1989年这些学生。
Can the Beijing regime tolerate Hong Kong?
北京可以容忍香港这样的行为吗？北京难道不会视香港为一种威胁吗？一方面，北京视香港为一个威胁，可是另一方面，北京也认为香港这种高度的经济繁荣是就像在像一只。
They're trying to keep half of Hong Kong denying of
他们
reality of
他们非常珍视香港的香港给他们带来这种经济上的利益。
We have had a history of working courts and independence. You can't just wipe it. Sympathy for mainlanders. I know.
关于中国大陆是否有人同情香港人的这样一个问题，我之前在香港参加过这样的活动，我曾经看到过中国大陆人在香港。 参与这样的，可是当这些人在香港这些中国大陆的人参加香港的抗争活动的时候，他们远在中国大陆的父母却会受到这种警察的威胁，说哦，你的儿子在香港参加了这样的活动。所以我想。
And are inspired by, that's what Beijing is afraid of. They're afraid. That's why they first censored everything.
大陆人的行为同时也在激励着香港人，这才是北京最害怕的事情。中国大陆也有一些人，他们有这种可以翻墙软件来获得海外的自由信息。
For the Hong Kong democracy movement online, what has happened to them?
也有很多人在网上支持香港的运动，可是他们却受到了监禁和迫害。
And Mr. King, they're not able to tell mainlanders who do see what they're seeing.
可是他们中共到现在为止依然没有办法去使这些反抗的声音消失，他们也没有办法让这些能够看到真实信息的大陆人改变他们的想法，因为他们也想要自由。可是香港却是在前线的，香港的抗争是在最前线。 我想在这间屋子里也会有人，也会有北京来的人。
I don't want any misquotes.
And I want to thank you for your courage to speak the truth.
我想感谢你能够说出真话这样的勇气。
To make it clear to the regime in Beijing that democracy is an important value.
我们想确保北京的政府知道我们是非常珍视民主这个价值的。
I want to thank this panel for coming before this commission, providing some perspective and expertise on this important and very timely topic. As many of you know, I spent more than 5 years living in Guangzhou.
我曾经在广州住过5年，我在上世纪90年代曾经在广州居住过5年，在一家私人企业工作。
With the ongoing erosion of autonomy and human rights in the region, and I will tell you, I stand with the citizens of Hong Kong.
我见证了香港这种民主受到的逐渐的侵蚀。那么，我想说，我和香港人站在一起。
Between the U.S. and 6 LegCo leaders who came to my home state of Montana. This event was important to better understand the situation in Hong Kong and identifying what some of the key issues were and have a very open and free exchange.
来到了我在蒙大拿州的家中，向我讲述香港的情况。
And the entire world must continue to support the
我认为
autonomy
整个世界必须继续支持香港的自治和民主。
It is one country, 2 systems. I was in Hong Kong on June 30th, 1997, and saw the Union Jack come down for the last time. The Hong Kong central government needs to work with protesters to accept the demands put forward by the citizens of the country, and the use of excessive force by the police must end immediately.
我想警察的这种过度武力必须立刻结束。
Question, I'll start with Mr. Wong. The protesters have formed a consensus around 5 demands, including withdrawal of the extradition bill and, of course, universal suffrage.
关于5大诉求。
Does the government need to comply with all 5 demands immediately, or is there a phased or alternative outcome that might be acceptable?
政府是否现在就是必须立刻
回应5大诉求？ since 3 decades ago, even earlier than I born.
香港人在很多年前就开始进行了追求普选的这种抗争，在我出生之前就已经开始了。我们的5大诉求也是在现有的这种法律条框之下的。
And autonomy, especially with the quote of Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong.
北京也是对做出了这种港人自治的承诺的。我想我们的抗争将会继续进行。
So I would say that now we have continued our summer of discontent and becoming the year of discontent.
我想说，我们现在夏季的这种抗争之下，已经进入了抗争之年。
Let me, if I could, interject. Thank you. I've got a vote coming. I've got to get to. I'm probably going to get there quickly. But a follow-up question: How do you expect Chief Executive Carrie Lam?
你认为香港特首林郑月娥将如何回应这样的诉求？她又有多大的权利？还是说北京有最终的决定权？我认为林郑月娥只是北京政府的一个傀儡。我们现在已经意识到，是否撤回条例，是否停止警方暴力，这些所有的一切都取决于北京，而不是林郑月娥。他只是在听命于北京。北京过去一直在开这样的官方新闻发布会，去谴责香港的抗争者。我觉得这已经说明了北京在这个问题上的权利。
We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I think Mr. Smith has one additional question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate it. If I could, and Ms. Howe, you did mention it, and I think it's bears a little further scrutiny. One of the notions of there's no such thing as a free lunch, in my opinion, applies with on steroids to the issue of Confucius centers, which are just agents of influence, pushing the Beijing line. In the past, in both my subcommittee on human rights, which I chaired, and this commission, I've held a series of hearings on Confucius centers, as well as on those entities, universities, colleges that get access to the mainland China especially, and get an enormous number of perks, money, physical plant venues for their colleges or universities,
有非常多的美国大学，包括纽约大学在内。
One of my hearings, and asked that I could go and speak, and he allowed me to come and give a speech or a lecture on human rights in Shanghai at the NYU campus. But the concern is that there are en route to 1,000 or something like that globally, that is to say the Chinese government with these Confucius centers. We have 96 in the United States, 82 are public, 14 are private.
孔子学院在美国有90多家，他们每年都招入几千名学生。
And that is look at the terms and conditions, which really is mostly secret. But we have a situation where hand-picked teachers come to the United States, come to Africa,
美国高校签订的条款都非常的秘密，然后他们自己挑选北京。
And culture, but it's all about the worldview and the domestic defense of Xi Jinping's policies.
可是他们的教材中却有非常多的他们共产党的一些价值观。
About what's going on in Hong Kong right now, and those universities and colleges, U.S.-based, that are in China today, what are they able to say and do without fear of retaliation?
美国在中国设置的这样一些学校中，他们这样的美国高校，他们能在香港这种事情中能起到什么样的作用？比如NYU 在中国的上海设有分校。
Start off. Thank you. I think it's important also to note that the Confucius Institutes and the pushbacks have also been led by really active, wonderful activism by Students for Free Tibet and the Tibetan community supported by the Uyghurs. And I think they've had some really good victories that show we really can push back and get the institutions to be more accountable. The quick answer to what are they saying, it's what can they say will always be under the guideline right now. Under
在中国的这个美国的高校，他们在能说什么？
Where every single party non-member has to participate in political study. That the line of the day, what can be reported in Xinhua, what can be reported in the news, everything will be determined from the top. And if you say anything, and as you know, under the new regulations, under the Cybersecurity Act for the news is defined very broadly to include opinion, a commentary, including blogging, including so you can't say blog anything except what the line comes down.
现在新闻定义已经扩大为包括评论，包括博客。
Backed up by black hands, led by the U.S. Interfering in domestic an affair and violating China's sovereignty. This is the same old chestnut we all hear over and over, and they got to get a better story here. But that's what they keep saying, and so I think that is now the dominant what anyone can say. Because if you say anything against that, for example, you have a different idea. Not only are you violating the new news regulations, you're also running the risk of subversion.
所以就是，如果中国人他不光是在新闻里面，他甚至如果是在博客上发表一些支持香港或者是一些反对中共的言论，那么他也有可能面对这种审查和迫害。
My friends and colleagues say to the U.S., "Please save us."
我在香港的一些朋友一直在对我说啊，美国希望美国能够能够拯救我们。可是，
Please help make the human cost less, because
我想说
it's very clear and heartbreaking
全世界的人都应该去帮助香港减少他们这种抗争的损失。我想美国政府和这个委员会能做的就是尽量的减少这样的损失。
So this is like going inside of a black box, but let me speculate. Yeah. I am pretty sure that all the curricula are approved and reviewed. I'm pretty sure they don't exercise academic freedom and say, here's the creative thing I can do about Hong Kong.
我想说，那么在中国的这些
curriculum.
美国大学，他们的课程表一定都是经过审查、经过中共当局批准的。
You will know, yeah, there are just big holes in that history. What's happening, and all of the you'll probably read about the diverse ethnic groups in China. Happy people, happy Tibetans, happy Uyghurs. You know, you'll probably see that version of what is happening. So I'm pretty sure. The other thing is, if those institutes are also monitored. So if anyone says anything that actually challenges the dominant narrative, I'm pretty sure that teacher will be in trouble. So I think it's pretty tightly controlled, and money is the
这样的学校应该也是不会允许的。
to universities, and I think not only just for the Confucius Institutes, they sometimes come along with other really good goods like an endowed chair, like money for a chair, like money for a program. So I think there's this kind of
中共在海外的这种意识形态输出，除了孔子学院之外，他们有的时候还会给一些机构、一些委员会一些资助。
As somebody who loves Hong Kong. And personally and professionally, and as a member of the from the private sector, I think we need to also remember that every single SOE, state-owned enterprise, has a party committee, and now that requirement has extended to companies with foreign investments and foreign companies. I had a Canadian company ask me, how could that be? Why are they making us establish a party committee? I said, you're not being targeted.
有一家在加拿大在中国的公司问我说，我们为什么要被要求建立一个党支部？我说，他们并不是在针对你，而是所有的公司都要建立一个党支部。
Look at the annual reports of China Telecom, China Mobile. They have pictures of the annual meeting of the party committee saying, we did good. The party committee's happy with us this year. We complied. So I think the American companies going in, there are listed SOEs. I think Apple Daily reported over 120 that are listed, 100 Chinese companies listed on the Hong Kong Exchange. They all have party committees within their management structure.
我知道，苹果日报已经报道，就是有120家美国在上海上市的公司，他们都有党支部。
Thank you very much. You've been very patient. You've been here for 2.5 hours. I'm the last person, so you have to bear with me just a little bit more. But this hearing is winding down. First of all, let me thank everybody for being here. I mean, everybody's testimony has been, I think, informative and
我想，每个人的发言都有非常多的信息，给了我们非常多的信息和帮助。
You know, Congressman Smith earlier on in the hearing referenced kind of the past inactions by the U.S. government in response to human rights
刚才史密斯议员
China,
他讨论了美国政府过去在中国问题上的态度。
really things haven't got any better. Things are continue to get worse. And I think it's fair to say that, for the most part, the U.S. government has been very good at kind of talking the talk. You know, when it comes to Tibet, we issue the obligatory statement that we respect the rights of the Tibetan people to practice their religion, and we respect His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
美国政府在语言上做的还是比较好的，我们在语言上去支持西藏人。
You know, just talk in and of itself doesn't end up changing anything.
语言上并不能够真正的有所对形势有所改变，所以我们现在提出的这些法案，希望能够就是真正的有所行动，能够真正的产生一定的效果。
Items for us to pass in the House and Senate. And I believe, and I can probably give you an assurance that we will do that.
我相信我们是会这样做的。
Overnight, Senator Rubio talked about hearings that are happening in the Senate. We have assurances from the relevant committees in the House that they will move on this.
我们也得到了来自国会其他议员的保证，他们会支持这项法案，所以我认为。
Get the message on that, and that is, and we will follow through. So we have our assignments. Mr. Wong and Ms. Ho and Mr. Zhang, you've traveled, along with some of your colleagues who are behind you, and I want to recognize them as well.
我想感谢黄志峰何韵诗，你们从这么远的地方来，以及你们背后你们的这些同事从这么远的地方来呼吁国际社会对香港的支持。
For you to say, why it is so important that the international community and the United States support
国际社会
why that is critical to the success and what you are doing. And I also would like to get everybody's response to this, and that is.
同时，我也想知道所有人对这一点的反应。
Being honest with you, I have not. I've been somewhat disappointed in the current our administration's response.
老实说，目前为止，我并不满意美国政府对于香港的做法。我认为，对于香港问题的这种处理态度，我认为我们可以更加强硬一些。
What they should be saying when dealing with the Chinese government.
我想知道你们认为美国政府现在可以做的有哪些？应该做的是哪些？
Well, speaking to the what advice we could give the Trump administration.
那么我们对川普政府有哪些建议？
I would say that
我想说
U.S. responses have to be resolute, to use the Hong Kong term.
美国的态度必须非常坚决。如果我们不强硬，如果我们动摇，那么你将不会得到来自习近平和共产党的任何回应。他们会。
is what rules Beijing right now, and even in Hong Kong and Tamar. So this deal making doesn't really mean much to them because whatever deal that they make, they're going to
协议并对于北京来说，协议并不奏效，因为你无论与他们达成了怎样的协议，他们都将不去遵守这种协议。
We call it party speak, and I think the administration has to be aware of this party speak and understand it.
我认为，当下政府应该更加理解中共的这种。
This is the first ideological confrontation of the new Cold War. Whether or not you agree it's a Cold War or not, the discussions have been out there.
这是现在是一场意识形态的战争，也是一种新的冷战。 今天坐在这里的这些见证人，他们想要拯救香港的自治，想要拯救香港的体系。可是，在北京，在香港的一些地区，他们试图将这种“一国两制”武器作为一种武器来攻击美国。
Weaponization of one country, two systems, or the two systems specifically, is looking at
将
how
这种
China
体
can
系
use Hong Kong's advantages,
军事
such
化
as U.S. customs treatment of it, to exploit the world. We've seen it
是
with the
中共试图
recent
在利
scandal
用
with
香
the
港的这种
United
经济上
Nations.
的优惠待遇，
Patrick Ho was basically found
在利
guilty
用
of state capture of the
全
United
球
Nations
其他的
to
国家。
promote the Belt and Road Initiative.
他们现在也在推广“一带一路”政策，“一带一路”的项目。
From Ukraine, that was done through a whole series of deceptions and manipulations of Hong Kong's special status. And these types of things are still going
这种
on
也是
today.
完全是在欺骗世界人民，同时也在利用香港的这种优惠、经济上的优惠、贸易上的优惠待遇。
And anybody affiliated with the CPPCC or the NPC differently than how we would treat regular Hong Kongers. Thank you.
Ms. Horn?
I really think that's a scary thought to give advice to Trump or the administration, but I think that any actions by the administration has to hold true to the U.S.'s core values. The U.S. has core values on human rights and democracy.
所有的政策都应该反映美国的这种核心价值。那么，美国对于人权来说是有核心价值的，是保护人权的。
The ideological confrontation
这种意识形态的冲突
is actually much more than that. It's really China against the world. It's not two models of
不仅
equal
是
legitimacy.
其实是一个很大的问题，而是其实是中共与全世界的这种对抗。
It's the model that the international community, with Eleanor Roosevelt, in fact, playing a very key role in the Universal Declaration, it was a world order that came out to say we will never again have what happened in Nazi Germany. We will never again have mass detentions.
二战结束
We
后
will never have mass trampling on human
全
beings.
世界
And so
似
to
乎是
take
签署了
down
这样一
that
个
order, it's
约
not
定，
about
就是我们再也
models.
不要
The Chinese
让
models are not
发生在纳
co-equal.
粹德国的事
It
情
is
再
a
一次发
Chinese
生。
party model, and I think we should
可是
start
现在又有
framing it
了
as China
中国共产党的这种模式，
against the dominant world
所以我
order.
想说
It is a dominant
这
world
场
order.
冲突其实是中共和这个全世界的这种抗争的这种冲突。我想中共应该面临更多的后果。当美国站起来发言的时候，这些话。我相信北京现在我相信北京现在就有人在听我们在说这些话。我们现在的直播应该北京的当局政府也在看。中共这个政府它是想要一个政权的合法性的。如果没有合法性，这个政权就没有办法继续执政。
Thank you, Mr. Zhang.
所以我觉得美国政府需要指出，我们不会给你的政权这样的合法性，因为你现在的行为就像暴徒一样。
China is picking up all the fights with other countries in the free world. China is expanding their military in the South China Sea.
中共在南海扩张他们的军事势力。
They have the ownership of the South China Sea, which severely threatens the security in the Asia Pacific region.
对于亚太地区的安全来讲有非常大的威胁。
Regarding the Huawei incident, and
那么包括在香港的华为案件。
Only China, I think. And this is unreasonable, and that explains how assertive China is. And that's why I believe only the American, you are the only superpower that can really try to.
我想美国是这个世界上唯一一个能够去挑战中国的这样一个国家。
Silent invasion. I use the wording according to the Professor Hamilton in Australia. They are using a very silent invasion, using their economic dominance,
中国现在通过经济上的这种主导，在全世界实施他们的所谓像这种殖民一般的政策。
Some East Asian countries and like the country like Sri Lanka, they have to lease a military port to China for 99 years. And apparently this is a new imperialism for me, and I believe only U.S. can contain China. And also, secondly, I believe why U.S. should be concerned about Hong Kong is that you have many interests in here, and you have to secure your interests. For example,
因为美国在香港有非常多的利益，那么你应该去保护这些利益。
sanction that Hong Kong should not allow a ship which carrying the oil from the Iran. And the point is that Hong Kong government, they ignore the U.S. sanction, and they allow the ship from the Iran to come to Hong Kong and try to carrying those oils back to Iran. And Apparently, this undermines your interest, and that's why this is one of the most important reasons
香港不应该成为中共拿来和伊朗进行这种交易的一种工具。那么美国应该停止这样的行为。
This historic fight in Hong Kong has only been possible with the determination of the youngsters and of the Hong Kong
香港人
people.
之所以能够继续这场历史性的抗争，当然他们的动力是非常一大部分是来自于年轻人的这种坚持。
The continuous attention on Hong Kong issues, and of course to the push of this act, because this has contributed in giving hope.
我认为这些美国的这种关注和对这种法案的推进，其实是在给香港人希望，是在告诉香港的年轻人，你们其实正在改变着世界。这其实真的是一个全球性的这种冲突，是我们对普世价值的一种保护。
We would be seeing a momentum in the international communities.
我们希望这种法案，如果这个法案，如果这两个法案如果通过的话，那么其他的国家也许会提出更多的类似的法案去保护香港。
Actually destroying these values on a daily basis. So thank you very much.
Mr. Wong.
With the sharp power expansion from China to Canada and Australia, the Belt and Road Initiative
中共对加拿大和澳洲的这种渗透，以及他们通过“一带一路”的这个项目对其他国家的这种渗透。
After entering WTO, after promise on joint declaration, and even having the negotiation with US on the trade deal, we all are aware the uprising China model is just the expansion of authoritarian rule and without any
扩张的中国模式是对全球民主价值的一种挑战。香港人是站在最前线，在挑战的这种专制的集权。如果香港倒下的话，那么接下来下一个倒下的可能就是整个的这个自由世界。我希望国会能够通过香港人权与民主法案。现在我们不仅是在经历一场政治危机，也是在经历一场人道主义危机。2年前，我看电视的时候看到了北京当局。
Which means the authoritarian rule represented by President Xi will be the Emperor Xi. So that's the uphill and long-term battle.
我当时看到了北京当局无限期的延长了这个中共主席的这个任期，那么我就意识到，将我关进监狱里面的这个习近平，他现在已经成为了几乎是一个君主一样的这样的角色。
And I think it's the time to thank all the congressmen and senators in the past few years and even in the past few decades, really paying attention to protest movement in Hong Kong.
想要借这个机会感谢那些在过去几个月、在过去几年中一直关切着香港形势的美国的议员们。
Let me thank the staff of the Commission for all the work that they did in preparing this hearing. Let me thank again the panelists. And to our friends from Hong Kong, let me thank you.
我想感谢所有为准备这场听证会做出努力的工作人员。
Action here in the Congress is, your courage that we see unfolding on our television screens and we read about in the newspapers. I have to tell you, I think for everybody here.
我想今天在场的所有人，你们都激励着我。我们今天有一个非常多元化的这个政治组成。可是我们一起和香港人站在一起。
I can't thank you enough for being here. So, thank you, and this hearing is adjourned.